We'll go ahead and call to order the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly Work Session of Thursday, October 31st, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. and we are in the Assembly Chambers. The first item we have is citizens' comments, and the local number is 907-486-3231, and the toll-free number is 855-492-9202. Anybody wishing to speak under citizens' comments, please come forward at this time.
My name is Fred Roberts.
Fred, the mic isn't on. You have to.
Yes, a sign that. My name is Fred Roberts. I'm with a member of the Bayview Road Service Board, and I here to oppose the new road service contract that has the feature self-dispatch. We want to continue on as we have for the past 35 years. We want to be able to call out for road service when we need it, not when the contractor thinks we need it. Bayview is one of the smaller road services, and we don't always need service when other road services need it. We watch our budget. Sometimes we can save money on plowing and grading, and then use that for other maintenance and improvements later on the next summer and things like that. So in the past, we have established a little savings account for that kind of stuff. But with a self-dispatch where the contractor decides when he comes out, at the end of the contract period, there won't be any money left over. He's going to consume it all, whether he comes out or not, and we do not want that. We want it just like we've had it for the past 35 years. We want to call our own dispatch.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else wishing to come forward?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Lance. I'm with the Menasha Bay Road Service area, just adjacent to Bayview. And historically, we collaborate a little bit. If we anticipate a need for service, we'll call these guys and say, hey, are you getting ready to call your contractor? We had the same contractor before as they did. And that way we could help at least defray our mob and demob costs and share the cost of that with our service area. We have about twice as many miles of road. Well, we had 2.1 mile road approximately, and they have about
you can
a mile.
talk. I'm not on.
And
It's a light green on it.
it's green.
It's green. It's on. That was Jared.
So for the audience, does that sound better?
Oh, you're fine. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So the big, so with the loss of Brecken as our contractor in September, we were kind of left hanging, and we needed more grading done to close the road good before it freezes, which is always an issue. We try to do the last grading just before freezing to get potholes and, you know, the bad spots fixed before it freezes. And, well, so here we are. Brecken did agree to do one last time, and they did actually just yesterday, so that's great. But our big concern with this new contract is it does not include maintenance, which is the grading of potholes. And with the new contract, it won't even be in force until, well, it runs through May, and it does not include grading, okay, for maintenance. So we're going to be probably from about April through to May, we won't have any grading unless the borough steps in and makes some extraordinary exception or some, just a spot on call type, calls the contractor or whoever to help us out. But the biggest thing and I've talked to Fred and I've talked to Sean, both from Bayview, as well as Patty O'Donnell, who's the chair, I'm the vice chair of Menashka. This thing about response time, self-dispatch, that whole paragraph, that part 3A, and then all the sub 1, 2s, and 3, 1, 2, they just delete that. That would take care of this issue about self-dispatch. We always anticipate a snowstorm, and we call our contractor and give them a heads up, hey, we're going to probably need you at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning before the school buses come. We've got some really bad roads, whereas Bayview does not have as bad of a steep hills as we do. We're in a different climate zone, in fact, at the top of like Mountain View Drive.
Go ahead and continue.
So the point is that please take that 3A of self-dispatch out of the contract. And then the other issue was the flat rate. We've never done that before, and so that's something that you guys should look into a little bit more. I'm not sure how that would work out for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else wishing to come forward? Or do we have any calls? No calls. Go ahead.
Good evening, Borough Assembly members. Happy Halloween. I wanted to drop in tonight and thank those of you in person for your willingness to assist me with the issues I brought before you. I appreciate all of you that have taken the time to reach out to me, to return my voicemails, and to plain communicate with me. I also appreciate those of you that have recognized the problems I brought to your attention and rallied behind me to be part of the solution. Mostly, I appreciate the removal of the tree and the start of the ditch clearing. I do have one letter to leave with you tonight. It's from my neighbor Heather, who's also experiencing issues with water due to the lack of drainage. I told her I would bring it to you as I'd planned to be here anyway. I have all of my communications and efforts documented that have happened since the last meeting on October 17th. I can get those to you if you need, but I didn't want to inundate you tonight with paperwork again. I'm not planning to stay for the entire meeting, for obvious reasons, but I would like to be more present at meetings in the future and learn more about the inner workings of the assembly. I might even try to get involved in the future. I feel it's important to assist people, and if I can help with somebody else making a work request easier and a more effective process with a much shorter time frame, I'd absolutely love to save somebody else the trouble and struggles that I've experienced. So again, thank you all very much for being part of the solution, and my children want to thank you as well.
Thank you.
And we wish you guys a happy Halloween and have a good evening.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak under citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close citizens' comments and move on to agenda items. The first item is ocean pasture restoration presentation of a 3-year pilot project of ocean and fish restoration in the Gulf of Alaska. Rob Lindsay, and I'll let you introduce from there. So, and basically we've got 15 minutes allotted, so thank you.
We have with us on the Zoom as our Vice President of OPR, Mr. Ted Crookson. He's a lifelong Alaskan and a keen-eye set netter. I'm Rob Lindsay, lifetime Kodiak and commercial fisherman, kind of a student of fishing history, fishing family. My great uncle was Lowell Wakefield. He was a real pioneer, first American catcher processor. You know, fishing, especially, I mean, it's all the news, it's all the buzz. I mean, this king thing, there's nothing new. I mean, it's just one more great big stone. And we've seen kind of headline after headline. First of all, I'm really gravely concerned about my children, my grandchildren. You know, fishing is the bedrock foundation of this community. And, you know, and we have all of the participants just, you know, pointing fingers, playing the blame game, management, this, that. We've had invested millions of dollars in research on the uplands. We have, I fish Prince William Sound. We've got millions and millions of dollars invested in hatcheries over there. And, you know, and what we see is a declining resource. I think that's pretty agreeable. Nobody has one single cause. We believe, ocean pasture restoration, firmly that it's in the open ocean, especially for the salmon, but they're the canary in the coal mine. The health of the ocean is, I believe, beyond argument, in some jeopardy, and along with that, the fish and the oxygen we breathe. With that said, we have everybody, all these user groups lining up. We have been limited entry, rationalized, and we've been chopped up in quotas for decades now, and yet we're seeing a decline of resource. That's scary, but I'm an eternal optimist. And after experiencing my first of 2 pink salmon disasters in 2016, I reached out to a man that had done something about it. And I'd always been a fan of his project, Mr. Russ George. And he likens what we're doing right now as everybody's lining up to see who gets to shoot the last buffalo. That said, Russ, with the aid of the Haida Gwaii tribe, did a significant project in the Haida Gwaii eddy, ocean eddy, right at the continental shelf. And in my mind, the results of that project were beyond refute. Alaska had a huge run, as did, that's the year the Fraser River, well, the following year. The Fraser came in with the all-time probably historical record of 74 million fish. Ted experienced pretty good runs of reds, and the king population wasn't much at all the question it is now, both in, I believe, 2013 and 2014. So what we're doing isn't without study and a lot of science. The Haida Gwaii, as I understand it, was took over 28,000 samples, and we will be doing the same. What we'll propose, among other things, we anticipate Kodiak being the home base of all operations in the Gulf of Alaska, probably all the way down to the Canadian border, and perhaps out in the Bering Sea as well. We don't know as much as far as restoration of some of the crab issues, but we believe it's all tied together. Ted's going to kind of walk you through the science of that. I don't want to scare you. We're only going to use 5 of the PowerPoint slides. I'd like you to have all that to take home and think about it. And when we're done this evening, all I ask you is just keep your mind open, consider what we're trying to say, what we want to do. We're not coming here looking for money. We quite the opposite. We have backers. What we need is support. We need a boost. The Legislative Seafood Task Force has been meeting monthly since September. We gave testimony. In September, they will meet again in Anchorage. Right in the middle of this month, we had hoped they would meet in Kodiak. Gary Stevens is the chair of that task force. Louis Stutz is on it. Sarah Vance is on it. Altogether, there's 7. Their task is to put forward a proposal for when the legislature reconvenes, and we would really like to be part of that proposal. I think Ted will go into it. What we hope to do is to get named alongside just an addendum to SB 50, which was kind of landmark legislation passed last year. With that, I'm going to give it over to Ted Crookston, although I want to leave you this, my good friend Russ George, who I consider one of my best friends now. I called him in 2016 after, man, it was a disaster in the Sound. and this year was even worse by far. But Russ likes to say, everybody's queuing up to see who gets to shoot the last buffalo. Anyway, at this, Ted, are you ready to take it over?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you and see you. I know that we're in a short time table, so I won't get too sidetracked. But I am a little disoriented on the slides. I don't know, or do you see the PowerPoint slides at all? Or I don't know if they're on your screens or if they're on one there.
Yes, Rob just started the PowerPoint with the OPR Alaska Incorporated Ocean Restoration slide is in front of us.
Okay. All right. Great.
And Rob has the clicker.
Okay. And so you're looking at it on your screens? I mean, or is there a screen I'm supposed to be able to see?
It's on our screen, and the audience also has a screen that they can see it.
Okay. Well, I don't seem to see it, so
And Rob can come up to the podium to let you know which
it'll be fine. I'm oriented. I'll just look. I have it here on my screen, and this presentation that we have is way too long for just the 10 minutes that we have left here. So it was the presentation that we presented to the Seafood Task Force in October, and so I was just going to highlight 5 slides from that. So if you've just got the old screen there, screen number 1, that's our name, OPR Alaska Inc. We're an Alaska company. We incorporated in Alaska several years ago, but our parent company is OPR World, and so we actually have multiple companies in different areas that we're in the process of building up and in getting ready to deploy. So to recap a little bit myself, like Rob said, I too am a lifelong Alaska commercial salmon fisherman over in Cook Inlet. Been doing it for 60 years. I was just a little boy when we started, and I've seen my livelihood go from a very successful, wonderful family operation that has all kinds of benefits. Then I was looking forward to having a legacy going forward for future generations, and it's just been ripped right out away from us because of the collapse of the king salmon. And so I feel it very passionately, and I went looking for solutions myself, and similarly in 2016 I became aware of the British Columbia's effort off of Haida Gwaii that Russ George did, and got involved with him at that point. So I've worked with him ever since that time. Russ is out of state right now doing some other things down here stateside, and it's not available, but I've known him for these 8 years, and he's just the highest caliber of individual, and has more experience than anybody on the planet in this particular field that we're going to talk about here just in the next few minutes. I'm going to introduce it to you as quickly and as succinctly as I can, but we've gotten involved in the thing that's brought us here is we became aware when the task force, the Seafood Industry Task Force, was formed, that we wanted to carry on work that we've already done with the state with 2 prior hearings that we gave to both the Senate and the House in prior legislative sessions, and go and work with this task force. And the reason that we're talking to you folks here tonight is, in addition to speaking with the task force, we have spoken with the governor's office, and we're speaking with 2 gentlemen in his policy office, or office of policy, I guess is the way you say it. And both members of the task force and the governor's policy office are interested in hearing from other stakeholders, other municipalities, other interested parties. And so that's why we are continuing the outreach that we've been doing. and have come here to Kodiak where you've got this, strong presence with the, just the terrible hits that the seafood industry has recently sustained. We don't need to review them. Everybody is aware of them. So our message is this, is that this seafood crisis is really a crisis of abundance. That was brought up in the recent debates here that were held with the that there in Kodiak a while back with the representatives, the U.S. representatives that were running, and it was brought out that the whole problem is one of resource, or not resource, but abundance. If the abundance was restored, then all the problems would go away. And that was very, very true. We totally agree with that. Well, where is the abundance gone? Like, as Rob said, from those that are in the know, it is an ocean phenomenon. There's really little dispute amongst those that study this and that are watching that there's some form of ocean collapse. What is that ocean collapse? Well, the ocean collapse is literally the dramatic reduction of phytoplankton. The phytoplankton are the basis of the food chain, those small microscopic photosynthesizing cells that are plants that feed up to the zooplankton that are animals, and then all the way up to the food chain. Well, then digging a little deeper, what is it that's caused this well-established reduction of the phytoplankton? Well, this is where we come in, and it is not our idea on how to solve this. This, Rob, if you want to go to slide number 5, is that the next one, or was it 6?
It's up, Ted.
Slide number 6, okay. There was a very renowned oceanographer, John Martin, back in the 1970s, that from Moss Landing Labs in California, that figured this out, did the math, the science, and established that the primary problem with what was happening to cause these phytoplankton to collapse was the reduction in the amount of naturally occurring dust that would blow out over the ocean, and that dust holds an essential micronutrient of iron. And it has been shown that by, and I don't want to make it oversimplified, but it is the addition of the right kind of the right amount in the right places of iron into the ocean water that the phytoplankton, it turns on the photosynthetic switch, and they naturally reproduce, and that starts the whole process. We have done this. This is our third effort in doing this, and so we have the more experience than anyone else. If you look at here in slide 10, Rob.
We're there, Ted.
Yeah. Okay. This is 50 years worth of data. The one arrow that shows the 2012 was when that test pilot project was done, and then there was an immediate uptick in productivity the following years. There are some that say, yeah, but you can't claim that that's you guys. But in 50 years of data, there's never been anything where that same phenomenon occurred. So I'll share a brief story from a NOAA scientist that I reviewed this with, who was familiar with the 2013 record year, and I told him what had happened in 2012 from this project, and his response was, wow, well that makes sense to me. I think what you need to do is duplicate the effort and see if you can duplicate the results. And that's what we're saying, exactly. We know there's not enough data here and enough science and enough experience to have anybody positively believe this. We are saying that we want to go out and do this work, self-funded, and let the data do the talking, and we're just trying to get appropriate levels of transparency and engagement from the state officials so that they understand what's going on. I'm watching the clock here. We've got just, we're winding down. Rob, why don't you go to slide 21, and I'll just recap here what we're really trying to get accomplished. This Alaska Seafood Task Force, we're trying to get some, like I say, this a broadened sense of consensus. That's the word I'm looking for. Consensus, whereby they will take a serious look. Seems to be an element in their minds that, like, well, there's nothing that we can do. Yeah, sure, ocean restoration sounds great, but what can we do as a task force? Well, here's 5 things that we are trying to get this task force to realize they can do. To have the ocean restoration be listed as a top recommendation of the task force. We are prepared and preparing to at sea in this summer of 2025 to start the work. Item 3, we want the ocean restoration to be backed by the legislature and the governor as an effective and approved method of carbon capture, and that ties into aspects of it that I haven't had time to go into tonight. But we're not expecting that legislation is actually passed, but we have some draft legislative pieces that can help enable the work, and so we're just wanting to get those introduced and get the process started. That's really the main thing. I'm just cognizant of our time here. So we hope to be able to get some dialogue here with other stakeholders and with you as a community, with the mayor's office, the borough, and see if we can't foster some positive dialogue and help build a sense of consensus to have us go out and prove from experience and let the data do the talking that this can really work. And everybody else, all the other scientists and academics and state programs can continue. We're just saying, let's let this be done simultaneously right alongside, because clearly the status quo is not working, and it's time for some, we would think that, new ideas and especially some proven technologies should be, welcomed and explored. So thank you for your time, and hope we can have some ongoing dialogue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Robbie.
And
You
I'll
can-
remain after the meeting if anybody has questions on
Okay,
that last
any
page.
closing comments you want to make?
No,
at this point?
I echo
Okay.
what you said. Other than
Okay.
I believe in it my whole heart. I've been staring at that patch of ocean, and I've been to the edge, and I think everybody in the situation would say we're looking at a dwindling resource, and we have all manner of management things, and we're not seeing an uptick on a broad scale. We believe we have an answer. It's worth trying. We just need your support.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm sure there's going to be a fair amount of follow-up on this in the future. So, thank you, and
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on tonight for this.
Okay, very good.
The next item we have on the agenda for discussion is ordinance amending various sections of the Kodiak Island Borough Code, Title 17 zoning, to include defined intent and development standards for accessory dwelling units. Staff report, Manager Amy.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. The Kodiak Island Borough Planning and Zoning Commission began working on potential amendments related to accessory dwelling units, starting with a work session in May of 2023. On June 18, 2024, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-1 to recommend approval of ordinance fiscal year 2025-03 to the Assembly. In order to cover all of the different topics, the discussion was broken into 2 work sessions, one on October 10th and again tonight on the 31st. After the meeting on October 10th, the Community Development Director created 2 documents. The first is a table that identifies the current regulations from the proposed regulations to further illustrate the proposed regulation change. And the second document is a table that provides similar development standards from other Alaskan communities. Our Community Development Director is here tonight to start the discussion on the second half of the suggested changes.
Oh, I'm good, thank you. Chris French, Community Development Director. As the manager pointed out, for the October 31st work session, We have 4 items that were changed in the proposed ordinance from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first one is the deletion of the owner requirement that required that the owner live in one of the units, either the ADU unit or the principal unit. That is the first change I want to discuss. As the manager pointed out, I did create a couple of tables for the assembly. The first one is, it's an ADU comparison table, so it goes through the zoning districts listed in the ordinance that would allow ADUs, gives you information on the type of zone is the single-family zone, which of course all these are. The area, how much of the borough is zoned are located within those zoning districts, and then also the minimum lot areas of those zones, and as well as the setbacks and how that relates to the maximum building area once you subtract the setbacks from it. What I will also say is we also compare in this table what is currently in the regulation versus what is being proposed in the ordinance. So for example, for ADUs that are attached, the current regulations allow those to be approved administratively, except for in the rural residential zone where it requires a conditional use permit. For detached ADUs, conditional use permit is required in the R1 zone. However, the conservation zone is administrative approval, as well as CUP in the RR1 zone, but also administratively approved in the RR2 zone, and then a conditional use permit in the rural residential zone. The proposed amendment before you would make all those zones be administratively approved, no matter if it's attached or detached. And again, that's with them meeting the standards that are listed in that ordinance. And then also I wanted to point out the ADU sizes in here. So you also, the current regulation ADU size, our maximum size is 575 square feet in the R1 in the current ordinance, and then it's 725 square feet in the other zoning districts. The proposed ordinance would increase that to 800 square feet for all those zones. And then for your parking requirements, the current regulation, if it's less than a 600 square foot ADU, it's 2 spaces required. If it's more than 600, it's 3 spaces required in all those zoning districts, whether it's R1 through the RR zone. And then your proposed parking requirement through the ADU ordinance before you would split it up based on whether the properties in the city of Kodiak or outside the city of Kodiak. Within the city of Kodiak require 1 additional parking space for an ADU, and if you're in the borough, it would require 2 parking spaces. I would also say the ordinance, which we were talking about, the owner requirement, that requirement would be proposed to be removed in the ordinance before you. In the second table that I put together on ADU standards by Alaska community, I pointed out in there that only one of those 7 communities that I looked at have an ownership requirement. The rest of them do not have that requirement. And then going back to our list of 4 things we're talking about tonight, we added a requirement that ADUs must be behind or to the side of the principal dwelling unit. I looked at these 7 communities in Alaska. They did not have none of these had the exact same requirement, but several of them, as listed in here in terms of location on the lot, had requirements of the ADU being either behind the structure or not to be set back any closer than the principal unit, sometimes 10 feet further back than the front of the principal unit. So there was some requirement in there about relation of the ADU to the front property line in relation to the principal dwelling unit. So very similar types of requirements. And then our third requirement we're talking about tonight was added a requirement that a property must meet the minimum lot size of the zoning district in order for them to be administratively approved for an ADU. Actually, several of the 7 communities that I looked at had similar requirements. The city borough of Juneau had a similar requirement, and the city of Sodalton as well, and then the city of Palmer listed as specific square footages that would be needed in order to be able to administratively be approved for an ADU. And then The last requirement we're talking about tonight would be the removal of the R2 zone from the list of zones that permit ADUs. When I looked at these other 7 communities, none of them allowed a duplex zone to have an ADU, and so that seems consistent with what this proposed amendment is here in the current ordinance before you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. I did summarize in the agenda statement what we discussed at the meeting on October 10th as well, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Chris, I apologize in advance. I didn't read my packet till I was on the plane today, so I didn't have a chance to front-load you with any questions that I had before the meeting. I will not make a habit of that going forward. I read through, I think, my concern with this piecemeal approach to ADUs, I've been listening to all the meetings and the discussions that had happened before tonight, is we're looking, it seems like this body is looking to solve an ADU question without tackling the larger rental question. And I couldn't vote for this one way or another without knowing what direction we're going to go as it pertains to short-term rentals in the community, because that's going to have a big impact on what I think this should look like in the future. I looked at some of our other coastal communities in Alaska. You're right, Juneau doesn't have that requirement, but Juneau just started a registration in 2023 requiring all short-term rentals to be registered with the community. Seward's doing the same. Sitka has prohibited short-term rentals largely, but grandfathered in those that were already there. So I think my point being, until we know what it is we're trying to accomplish, I just don't see a path forward on a single piece of legislation.
Okay. Question was asked about how large Aleutian homes are. I think that some of the 2-bedroom Aleutian homes were between 700 and 800 square feet on there. Then you had 3 bedrooms, and you had 3 bedrooms with garages, just to give you an idea on there. Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to address Assemblymember Johnson's comments, when we first started talking about ADUs at the assembly level, we could not divorce ourselves from short-term rentals. And so this approach that we went to, where we broke up the topics into 2 issues, was just so we could focus on the actual changes that planning and zoning were requesting, or it put in that ordinance. It took them over a year to get it to us. So there's been a lot of conversation about all those topics at the planning and zoning level. And this attempt, by putting it into 2 different topic groups, is just to decide what we want those to look like. It's not to evade the short-term rental thing by any means, but it's just to see, does the assembly have an appetite for addressing this right now? If you don't, it can get put back with planning and zoning to answer any questions that you might have, and then come back once those questions are answered. But this was our attempt at keeping the conversation focused on actual ADUs. But obviously, the short-term rental subject is a big thing for the community.
Yeah, one thing I'll say, too, is I attended all of the planning and zoning work sessions and meetings. I think on there, might have missed one of them. One of the members, one of the yes votes, voted yes, so that this could come and have discussion at the assembly. She was not necessarily in favor of what is here, but she's in favor of getting the discussion started here, so that then if it's referred back, they have something to work with there too. So, Bo?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. French, for packaging this up so well and gathering all this information from other communities. You did a wonderful job of consolidating this for us. I have a perhaps different perspective in that I want to see what happens with ADUs, because where we land with this potential change in how we approach these structures is it will affect the total amount of inventory available when we're talking about housing shortages and short-term rentals and how we're going to try to balance supporting tourism, but also addressing the housing shortage. I feel that this needs to come first. That way we understand what our full housing inventory looks like and potential for ADU development to shore up short-term housing needs for tourism, which will hopefully lessen the pressure on the single-family home inventory or R2 homes. So I view it in the opposite way, in that I'd like to see where we land with the ADUs, and then that will provide more information on where I'm going to go with. I have no less than 2 ordinances coming for short-term rentals for consideration, but until we have all of the information, I think this approach is my preference. But I do appreciate that thought.
Steve, did you have your hand up?
I agree that I think we need to deal with the ADUs. The short-term rental is kind of a second issue. It's also the fact that even though it's grown in Kodiak, I think we're rapidly getting to a saturation point of short-term rentals. And if ADUs are built and take some of that, it might encourage some of the buildings that are being used for that right now to return to the rental market. The town can only afford or support so many short-term rentals. And if a small unit next to a house opens up a full house, that's a plus. So I think we need to define this. I am a little concerned about the 800 square feet, only in the fact that that really is kind of a second home. Granted, I live alone, but I live in a 675 square foot house, and it's more than enough for me. So 800 is a fair amount of square feet. That's one of my concerns is, are you really turning R1 into R2?
And one thing I will just follow up on that is in the ADU standards table that I did by community, there's a lot of diversity in that structure size or ADU size. So I'd ask the assembly to take a look at those. As I mentioned at the last meeting on the 10th, we talked a little bit about ADU size, and we had stated a lot of communities use the percentage with the square footage, and how they do that can differ. As I saw here when I put this table together, it varies greatly between just these 7 communities that I looked at.
Scott and then Jared.
I'm concerned with this for a variety of reasons. The first one is when we dealt with ADUs previously, I pretty much insisted that we had the conditional use permit applied to most of them in order to inform neighbors that somebody was planning on this, adding another unit on their property. Because for most people, their house is their biggest investment. And in many cases, people worry about who would be living in this ADU. And it's scary to have your lifetime investment, your biggest investment, potentially harmed by nasty neighbors, I guess is the way to say it. So informing those neighbors within 500 feet of the locus of where you're going to build an ADU gives them a chance to deal with this and to look at the facts on it and everything, and not to dwell on the potential for loss. The other part of the question is the 800 square feet. That's an illusion home in your backyard or in your side yard, and that destroys R1. So I don't understand why you want to do that. I think R1 is something that people have paid significant money in order to achieve, and my guess is if we put it up for election, they wouldn't want that. That's the other thing. The third thing is the parking. It's a mess in the city, and you're talking about fewer parking restrictions than there are in the current rules, and I just don't see that being positive either. So thank you.
Jared and then Ryan. Jared, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I've listened, and there are a couple of things that I have questions to about. Chris, could you, in your looking at other ADU policies and those kinds of discussions, have you heard any concerns about absentee landlords who may not maintain their ADUs as well, blight, things like that?
Yeah, that's come up in, I'm not going to say it's come up in, it may have come up in other Alaska communities that have either removed the owner requirement or didn't have it in the beginning. In other places that I've worked, we've had issues with when the owner requirement was to be removed, the concerns over absentee landlords, and one of the ideas with is that maybe the owner requirement would help that. Only thing I can tell you about the owner requirement is it is difficult to enforce, and that's one of the main reasons why communities don't have it in the ordinance. But there are some good reasons for having it. One could alleviate some of the concerns about absentee landlords. Another one would be if it's part of an owner requirement that the owner live in one of the units, there is an argument to be made that it makes it more accessory to the principal structure if the owner has to live on the property in one of the units. Again, as I said, one of the reasons places or governments don't put it in place is just because it's very hard to enforce, especially when ownerships change and things like that. So it becomes difficult to enforce, but there are some good reasons for having an owner requirement.
Thank you. One more. I am somewhat, maybe not overly, or this isn't necessarily a high concern, but as square footage was brought up, I'm concerned about overwhelming existing neighborhoods or even the over-commercialization of residential neighborhoods with this. Have you seen, maybe you have talked about this and I haven't written it down, but have you seen policies that limit the number of new ADUs permitted each year?
I have not seen anything that limit the number of ADUs permitted each year. Certainly, that's something you see when we're talking about short-term rentals. There is ordinances like that. Not necessarily for ADUs. There's limitations in ADUs, of course, for their size. And when you're saying commercialization, I'm assuming you may be talking about short-term rental use of them.
Yes, yeah.
So there's certainly communities, even in Alaska, which regulate, can both units on the property be short-term rental or just one of them? For example, there's an example here from Soldotna that says only one of the two units on the property could be used for a short-term rental. However, what I'll say is, though, those communities also have a registration program, so you kind of you'll know up front who's, being considered for a short-term rental. So those kind of pair hand in hand sometimes, a registration program with restrictions like, how, can the ADU be a short-term rental, or can only one of the two units on the lot be a short-term rental? There are restrictions I've seen both here in Alaska and outside of Alaska that do that.
Thanks. That gives me something to think about. In general, I don't like removing the owner occupancy requirement, but I was talking to somebody this weekend, and I think one case that can be made for removing the owner occupancy requirement is for our aging population. I think it can benefit aging homeowners who need to move into healthcare facilities, or they need to move to a better climate for their health, and they need to downsize, and they need that income from their property investment to help with their health care. So that's something that I'm also thinking about too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Anything else, Jared, at this time?
No, thank you. I just had a bunch of trick-or-treaters run out to the door.
Okay, we'll still be here. Ryan, then Steve, then Bo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, thank you very much for putting this together. It is another job well done and easy to understand, and I appreciate your figures. This morning, on social media was a post about the concerns of only furnished rentals and only high prices and short durations, which were driving this young lady's daughter away from wanting to stay in Kodiak. So I have to tell you that ADUs may not be a cure-all, and there may be some complexities that come with ADUs. I believe that if we structure this correctly, that an ADU may be a resolve to retain some younger population that may have a different socioeconomic position or a younger generation that might not be able to afford one of those fully furnished short-term rentals. I also have concerns on an 800 square foot. I would propose that a 400 square foot limit be instituted, and I would also propose that owner living on the property would be instituted in some mechanism. But I fully support the ADU position. I support the work that you put into this. Looking at the other standards by other Alaska communities, I don't see my request as being far-fetched or out of line. So my position, 400 square feet, and the benefits outweigh the risks at this point in time. Thank you.
Steve and then Bo.
I have a couple of questions. First one from what you said is you said, if I heard you correctly, that some communities find it easier to keep track of owner occupancy because their short-term rentals are registered. Does Kodiak not require that?
So what I meant was they register their short-term rentals, and so it doesn't really affect the owner requirement. It's more in relation to if they have a ordinance in place that restricts, for example, if someone has an ADU on their property, they'll, like, for example, the city of Sodalton had a requirement that only one of the two units could be registered as a short-term rental. If they have a registration requirement in place, then they'll know if someone's trying to come in and register the second unit, that kind of thing.
Does Kodiak have a short-term rental registration?
It does not.
Okay, well, that's a separate issue I think the city or the borough should address, because how do you know if you're collecting bed taxes if you don't know what's being used for what?
So I will say, we do require certain uses to get a zoning compliance permit. As part of that, they do have to register for the bed tax. But again, we don't have a definition of short-term rental. We have vacation home, which has a very specific meaning. So if someone comes in and wants to do a vacation home, which basically means you're renting the entire house, they have to get a zoning compliance permit, and they have to show that they have tax registration. It doesn't hit all the different varieties of what we would call short-term rentals, but it does hit some of them.
Okay, maybe I'm a little confused.
And that's not really a registration, it just requires you to get that, to get the zoning compliance permit.
Because I thought that anything under 30 days was considered short-term as far as collecting taxes, or is that just in the city?
Under 30 days would, but in terms of having it to be required to get some type of permit, we don't have a requirement for a permit of, say, if someone's renting out a room or two rooms to someone under 30 days, there isn't a requirement for a zoning compliance permit. But if someone's renting the entire home out or the entire unit out, then we have that vacation home use in the code, which requires that they have to get a zoning compliance permit, which as part of that requires that they have registered for the bed tax.
But basically, at this point, someone could rent a room out and you'd have no idea. Be ready to
Typically, unless we saw them on, one of the websites or something, yeah.
Okay. And then, kind of hard to enforce, you said, the owner requirement. Could it be done very similar to the tax exemption, that you have to show one of the units is your primary resident?
The issue is more of how you require them to show it. So communities do it. In Alaska, it could be, if they're eligible for the PFD, but also other places outside of Alaska require them to meet the IRS definitions for what would be your primary residence. And that means you live there more than 6 months, and therefore you can use that address for your tax returns.
Okay.
You good for right now, Steve?
Huh?
Are you good for right now?
For right now, sure.
Bo and then Jared? Bo, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with some previous statements in as far as the size of the ADU. I'm not comfortable with 800 square feet either. And I am sensitive to turning R1 into essentially R2 if we were to do that. I do like the approach. I too read that social media post and a lot of comments and concerns, and these are kind of recurring, have been recurring for several years now within the community, in that even if someone has an owner occupancy requirement for 6 months of the year, that doesn't mean that that's a suitable place for someone to rent, to establish a footprint here in Kodiak. And from my understanding and from what I've noticed is a lot of short-term rentals go on the market during peak months, May through September, thereabouts October, and then they're pulled off the short-term market, placed on a longer-term market, but they're furnished, which doesn't really fit the need of somebody who's going to have to move out in a few months that has their own furnishings, their own bedding, things of that nature. I'm a fan of the City of Soldotna's approach that only one of the 2 units on the lot can be used as a short-term rental. That way the other one is either being lived in full-time by the property owner, or they have a true long-term rental that is available for housing inventory to be leased for the community. So I think that's one way we can think about addressing that particular issue. This is tough. I mean, there is a very strong demand for it, but as most of you already know, I'm leaning towards supporting more housing inventory for residents versus tourism. I understand we need to balance that and make that available, but I think we should be mindful that we don't go too far in the other direction to support the current more economically viable source of income for the community, which is tourism. But the long-term benefits of having housing stability, in my opinion, far outweigh the near-term benefits that some people are realizing with these really lucrative short-term rentals. So I think we need to think long-term, not just what's right in front of us, and my opinion firmly lands in making sure we don't do anything that's going to decrease long-term housing availability for residents of Kodiak.
Jared, you have the floor.
Thank you. I've been listening to the discussion about the square footage, and I have a question to the assembly, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, what's your question?
Okay. I think when we are thinking of bringing it down from 800 square feet, are we thinking just about detached units or all units? There are feasibly some attached, some interiors, a garage conversion that could conceivably be more than 400 square feet that would qualify as an ADU. So is the sentiment on the board or on the assembly about the detached units and square footage?
Jared, I'm going to interject here first. The current ADU size in R1 is 575 square feet, not 800 on there. So Ryan has a comment he'd like to go ahead and make.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's in direct response to Assemblymember Griffin. So understanding that potential conversion could be in excess, my entire intent of lowering it to a 400 square foot limit is a detached facility. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Scott?
I'm in favor of detached as well, the limit on detached.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment? You don't have to, but Steve?
Let's just say it was 400 square feet, but you have an existing building. Can they still file for an exemption?
The current regulations don't allow you to get any kind of relief from the standards. One of the reasons for changing how we require the conditional use permit would be if you can't meet one of the standards, then you apply and go through the conditional use permit process, which is a discretionary review process before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it allows you to provide your justification and argument about why you should be allowed to have relief. The current regulations does not allow you to get any kind of relief, even through a variance. The current regulations
But-
specifically state you can't get a variance for any of these standards.
Does so that doesn't also apply to the conditional use, or if we adopt this,
does
the
apply to-
conditional goes away?
It still would apply even to the conditional use permit. So, for example, the current regulations, for example, if you're in rural residential, we require the CUP for attached and detached ADUs. If you can't meet the 725 square feet and you want to meet 800 square feet, there's no allowance, even with the conditional use permit process, to be able to go above the 725. So one of the arguments for changing how we do the conditional use permit is to use the conditional use permit to allow people to justify why they should be able to go above the standards that are set in the regulation.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, if you had a building that had a shed, barn, or whatever that was 900 square feet because it's 2 floors, and you wanted to convert that to living quarters.
Yeah, they would be limited to that maximum square footage for ADUs. So for example, as we mentioned, that'd be 725 square feet, so they could create a 725 square foot unit out of that 900 square feet.
Okay.
And the rest of it, I guess, could be storage that would just be not part of the unit.
Yeah, as long as it's not habitable space.
Correct.
As the Coast Guard uses on some of their designs, then it would qualify under the square foot limit.
Correct. It could be a garage space for a vehicle or something like that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jared, I was going to go ahead and give you another shot at it.
Oh, no, thanks. This is, I think I got what I need. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion, questions at this point here? I think we've got some stuff to digest a little bit. Question would be, would you be interested in this being on one more work session as far as how we potentially look at turning this back to planning and zoning for additional work? David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start since I was the first comment on that. I guess what I was trying to get to, and Mr. Ames did a good job of alluding to it, is we don't know what the problem is. We can't even define it. And so that's what I was kind of trying to get at with, I'm not ready to vote on anything, because when we talk about whether it's an admin policy or a conditional use permit, regardless, it's just that much more inventory going out into the market here without any idea of what it's going towards or what we're doing with it. So I support ADUs. I think it's a great step forward, but before voting for ADUs, I'd like to see something passed that requires all these short-term rentals to register with the boroughs so that we can get our arms around this situation and know exactly how big it is.
Scott?
I'd like to see this on another work session. I think we have a lot of work to do. Not only the short-term rental issue, which is huge, and the fact that other ADUs that have been recently built are used as short-term rentals. So we have a bunch of stuff we have to sort out.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be the second assembly member to back Mr. Johnson's position on some form of registration. What I'd like to see is the staff come up with various proposals that, this is delicate because in government, you don't want to over-government. And you definitely want to ensure freedoms are maintained. However, there does need to be, in my opinion, an inventory control system. I believe that would give quantitative data to help substantiate short-term rentals, housing inventories, and I overall support that system. So I'd like to see a couple proposals. I'll be the second assembly member to request that from staff. Thank you.
Steve and then Scott?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised there is no registration or anything. If you have a rental property, you have to get a business license. And I don't see why short-term rental doesn't get business licenses, and therefore would have a record of them.
So they would get a business license in the city of Kodiak. They're also supposed to get a state business license, but there's no such business license for the borough.
Okay. But all the ADUs that were being used as a short-term rental would have to get a business license within the city, you're stating.
Correct. It could be, I mean, if they're also a long-term rental, it could be the same business
Yeah.
license, though. So
Oh, no,
it may
I have a
not
long-term rental.
differentiate, yeah.
I have a triplex, long-term rental, and I had to get a business license, and
Yeah.
that's, so,
So it could be one for all of those. It may not, but it may not differentiate that this one unit is a short-term, and just that it's a rental, yeah.
okay. But, yeah, I think some form of registration or something should be, so we know, or both us and the city know what's going on. I think this has to be a joint thing between us and the city to see the big picture.
Scott and then Bo.
I'm in agreement on this. I think that the other half of it is we need an enforcement mechanism, and that probably means hiring somebody. But I'm in favor of having staff work up that information. Thank you.
Bo.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to reaching out for co-sponsors because I already have two ready to go along the lines of licensing requirements or registration, however we want to categorize it, and another one to potentially address the major market drivers, or I guess I won't name them by names, but the two to three major websites that facilitate short-term rentals. You can require that they report who uses their site as well. So I have two that are ready to go. I don't see, the concern I have with putting those before the ADUs is I don't think that we've already gained a lot of progress on the ADU topic. I don't feel comfortable. I'm not willing to table it to wait for the others to come before it because we're not going to have that information in a timely manner. It doesn't sound like we're going to have a lot of resistance in getting those passed for licensing requirements or registration requirements. I'm also not inclined to task staff with gathering data before we decide how we want to proceed with that. It seems to me that that would be spinning their wheels before we have a clear sense of direction for them based on where we go. I'm not sure another work session is necessary. It sounds to me that most people have an idea of where they stand on each of these columns as far as lot sizes, or ADU size, parking requirements, whether it's detached or attached. If that's the case, then I'm happy to be patient, but I think, to me, it sounds like most people have already decided where they want to go with it. I'm one of those people. I'd be happy to move forward with it, but also a fairly patient person.
Bo, need you to remember, we currently have an ADU ordinance on the books that we're working with. These are changes to it. So taking time with it is not preventing somebody from doing something right now.
No, I understand.
So Ryan and then Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked the Assembly for a one-off in a different manner, and I'm going to ask the Assembly for another one-off. I'd actually like to take this issue to public comment before we vote on it and have members of the community come in and weigh in so that it's not a panel of seven dictating and that over-governance that I mentioned earlier. So I'd like to request that we take this to public comment and then vote on the issue. Thank you.
That's an option. Steve?
I agree that this is probably two separate issues. The ADU and the registry and licensing are two separate issues, and therefore, we don't need to intermix them totally. I think we can move forward. I know we have an ADU, but if changes are needed, then let's keep moving on that, and then start on how we keep track of short-term rentals. My opinion, the short-term rentals, as I said before, will take care of themselves, and the more housing space available in Kodiak, whether they move to the ADUs and it frees something else up. So I say we take them as two separate issues and concentrate on this one, and then bring up a separate one about registering and things like that. Thank you.
Okay, now, we can choose to talk about this or remand back, or we can ask for an ordinance to be brought forward for introduction on the 21st with a public hearing on December 19th. What's the wishes? I'm seeing 2 yes. Steve? Yeah.
Well, I think I want to move forward, but I would like to, before we vote on this particular one, are we talking about changing the size requirement?
Well, what Ryan is saying is, as it is, move it forward, get testimony, and then we would possibly remand it back.
Okay, I'd be comfortable with that.
Planning and
Yes.
zoning.
No, I'd be comfortable with that.
After
Get the
what we
public to comment,
hear.
get people to talk. That's who we represent, so yes, we should let them comment.
Amy?
I don't think a public hearing on December 19th is going to draw a crowd that, I mean, just because with people off island and close to Christmas, I would
Yeah, that
think that a
week.
public hearing maybe in January would be
January.
more appropriate for, so people are back on island and thinking about that kind
Okay,
of stuff.
so then what I would suggest is first reading on December 19th with a public hearing on January 16th. Amy?
And you want it to go just how it is without making any of the suggested changes thus far?
That's what I'm hearing
Okay.
right now. Dave?
I'm fine with that. I thought the collective group intent was to put some kind of caveat on the ADU size for detached versus on, but
Well, they,
we could do that via amendment during the reading. I mean,
yeah, and we can decide not to pass it. We can decide to remand it back to planning and zoning and say the basically turning, you could say the square footage doesn't work, the parking doesn't work, the R1 just arbitrarily turning into R2 does not work. We got lots of options, because for me, this does not work. So, Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my intent is to get public feedback and then rediscuss this, give direction to staff, finalize, vote, and move forward. I would also like to request that due to that latency and the discussion that we've had tonight, that we do have a concurrent discussion about a licensing or some sort of inventory control management at that time as well, so that although we agree they're separate but connected issues, I believe that public comment should capture both of those issues since they are married. Thank you.
Nova?
Mr. Mayor, schedule-wise, what seems like the schedule is going to be is introduction on December 19th, and 2 public hearings will be scheduled on January 16 and February 6.
Okay.
Okay.
I like to. Okay, Bo?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Sherritt's approach. Absolutely would not be comfortable proceeding without public input. And sounds like there's quite a bit of interest in other topics, so they will be coming to your desk very soon.
You guys can talk later. All righty. I think we've taken care of this one. So the next agenda item is continued discussion of policy decisions on the old mental health facility building. Staff report, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assemblymember Sherritt requested discussion of this item on July 25th. The Assembly held a work session on September 26th and discussed funding, renovations, deed restrictions, and possible use. I requested continued discussion of the use of these buildings. Since then, we requested a rough order of magnitude cost estimate of choices for the facility to be completed by Jensen Yorba Wall. That's in your packet tonight. Our goal is to have a little over $1.7 million of money under contract by December 31st. So we're looking for direction for that. We have gotten an email this week from the federal government saying, hey, Kodiak Island Borough, spend this money or it's gone. So we do have the option of putting it into lost revenue. But I think that because it's COVID money and it's for the whole community, it would be nice to see it go into a project. So that's why you have those estimates, and that's our goal, is to get direction on where that money should go.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Madam Manager mentioned, I did request this. We've got buildings that are sitting unutilized. They recently had mechanical system failure that created emergent actions to be taken. In reviewing this document and this rough order of magnitude, I have multiple questions about the validity of this rough order of magnitude. However, because the staff is looking for direction, no matter what the resolve or wishes of the assembly, the hazardous materials needs to be taken care of. For the record, I'm not bidding on it. However, that will need to be taken care of whether there's a renovation or rehabilitation. So I would suggest to utilize those December 31st funds of the $1.7 million that coincides with Project 1 of your ROM estimate total, and ask staff to solicit for proposals. And actually, let me correct that, solicit for an ITB based off of plans, drawings, specifications, and past data that has been collected. And if you need help writing that, since I will not be bidding on it, I would be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Steve, do you want to talk now, or do you want to hear the report?
Okay, let the report go first.
I'd rather have the staff report. Amy? I'd like someone to run through this on it. I don't see this
Do you want to do that?
being able to expend these funds by that time frame. Well,
I guess I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here. The one thing I will state is, irregardless of the direction, I would like to propose that we drain all the water back and get rid of any fluids in the facility, possibly tear out the toilets. That way we can avoid any future damage as we had last year, and we can kill our heating bill. I do believe that the abatement could be put out, and we could commit the funds. We may not have to do all of it. We may not require to do the UST immediately. You can absolutely, I agree with Mr. Sherritt, in order to tear these down, in order to remodel them, you have to take the asbestos, the lead, get that all out of there. It is drywall, TSI, thermal systems, insulation, surfacing materials. All of those can be removed, and I believe we can have a contract in place and awarded before the drop dead date in December. Happy to have assistance writing this to make sure we get it right the first time.
Bo?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Sheridan and Mr. Conrad, and that unless I'm misunderstanding, Project 1 and Project 2, both involve the same processes of abatement and demo. I think it'd be a lost opportunity for these funds if we risk this use it or lose it scenario and those funds do get swept back up. I I see it as a very low-risk scenario to proceed with Project One. It seems that that initial estimate would also give us a decent buffer should an RFQ or ITB come back a little higher than anticipated. So I would support getting that out as soon as possible to at least get Project One underway, which could stop at that point and we could have options, or we proceed with Project Two, but at least we utilize those funds while they're available. So that would be, I agree with Mr. Sherritt. Let's use them while the getting's good.
Okay, one thing I'd like to say is, how long are we required to advertise for?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. And then Steve, and then Ryan, and then Scott.
Okay, looking at this, Project One is abatement and demo. Is that preparing it for demolition, or is that taking the buildings down?
No, that demolition in this particular case is removing drywall interior finishes down to studs.
Okay, so it's preparing the building so it could either be renovated, or if it's chosen to be torn down, it can be torn down, because in its present state, you can't just take the material to the landfill, correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Then, yes, I could support one, because no matter what we do with the facility, it's got to be done anyway. Thank you.
After this one. Scott, and then Ryan.
I'm in favor of moving this along, as Mr. Sherritt and Mr. Conrad said.
Ryan.
Thank you. I would encourage us to put the abatement and the USTs together in the same bid. Perhaps the UST is an alt item, just to obligate the funds. I don't believe that this rough order of magnitude is accurate. I believe this ROM is high, even for an out-of-town company. Sorry, go ahead.
If I may?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
This was based on, Jensen Durable Wall actually participated in the similar construction in Juneau, and also on the units that Providence just put in, the apartment complexes. These estimates are based on that, and they will be refined. They are probably a little heavy. I will also point out that there's a few items in here that are not stated. One is that this also brings the code requirements up for sprinkler systems. There's a few recommendations made. If we move forward with number one, what I would request is to sit down with you and find out what your questions are, so we can get that moving forward as well, so that we can continue on this project. I would also propose we add one more UST, and that is across the street here at the Red Cross building. There's a 350-gallon UST that's unused in the ground. Let's get it out of the ground. I want to see all of them gone.
Yeah, I agree. Everything on Borough Hill.
Is there anything else you want me to go through on this, Scott?
No, I think this was part of what I was wanting to hear come out.
Okay.
Ryan, you got another comment?
Yeah, the only other comment I had is a couple meetings back, I believe while you were on vacation, I did ask the manager to ensure that the units were winterized. So
Okay.
that direction definitely was given. So if we need to ad hoc that into schedules, time is crucial of that to prevent further damage. Thank you.
Dave?
What I would suggest is that we don't couple it with what we're talking about here. We utilize our plumbing contractor to go ahead and drain everything down and eliminate the need for more fuel.
Agreed. Any further discussion? Amy, you feel comfortable?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay. 10-minute break.
Hey, can somebody tell me if my my new seat is not between the two Scotts?
You're on the end with Bo.
Sweet.
Right next to where you were.
I like it. That means that everybody can see my full face on camera.
What's that, Jared?
Sitting down there at that end, everybody can see my full face on YouTube and not just a profile.
Okay. We'll go ahead and reconvene the work session. Next item is discussion of personal property tax exemption ordinance. Staff report. Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This proposal was initiated by formerly Assembly Member James Turner and current Assembly Member Stephen Ames. It actually says Stephen H. Ames, very formal. They have asked staff to draft an ordinance to modify KIBC 3.35.030, which pertains to real and personal property exempted from taxation, by increasing the personal property tax exemption by an additional $100,000, bringing the total exemption to $250,000. According to the provisions outlined below, the ordinance must be included on an agenda by November 18th. The requesters retain the right to withdraw their request at any time. During the last agenda setting, Mayor Arndt, Assembly Member Smiley, and Manager Williams determined the financial impact of this ordinance should be discussed before an ordinance was prepared. In your packet tonight, you have the yellow sheet that Assembly Member Turner filled out, and you have the code 3.35030. This is, for the audience, this is just talking about senior exemptions and disabled veteran exemptions. And then I prepared a Excel spreadsheet so you could see what the impact to the different service areas would be and what the total impact would be. The column on the right-hand side that says total exempted is the amount of tax that the borough is not collecting. That first block is the with 946 exemptions this year. We did have 985 people who would have been qualified for an exemption, but 946 have actually gotten it for just this tax year. I threw in the 200,000 just so you could see some middle ground, and then the bottom one is the proposed $250,000 exemption. I used the numbers as if it was the same throughout, as far as where they're located in the city or in the different service areas, and then outside of the service areas, so Chiniak, Passaic, and the villages, stuff like that. So you can see right now with the state mandated exemption, we're a little over $1.6 million that we do not collect. Originally, the state paid us back for that and stopped doing that. If we were to raise it to 250,000, it would be just over 2.7 million that would not be collected.
Yeah, I'd like to say that basically the exemption would cost all the rest of the taxpayers $1.1 million, and that's quite a lot. Which one of you was first?
Me,
Scott and then Ryan.
Madam Manager, is there any way to means test these things? So somebody comes and asks you for the additional or the 250,000, is there any way to find out whether they really need it or not?
There are communities that do a needs-based addition. I think that would require hiring an entirely new, if not more than one employee to do that. So the communities, somewhere on the Kenai Peninsula has a $350,000 exemption. They have their 150,000 mandated, and then for the rest of it, people come in and have to show that they're needs-based.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to do an ethics check on the assembly. When we discuss something that could impact the assembly, I think that we need to also disclose if it could or could not impact us. I'll go first. I do have a disabled veteran status. I do not actively claim it in property tax, but I am a homeowner here in town. Because I don't actively claim it, I'll ask you to determine whether or not there's a potential conflict in any of the discussion that I take place on with that representative information. Thanks.
I do not feel there's a conflict. Scott.
I have a senior's exemption.
I do not feel that is a conflict.
Me neither.
Steve.
I have a senior exemption, but the dwelling I'm in presently is less than 150,000, so raising it or not makes no difference in my life.
You do not have a problem. Anyone else wishing to?
I have a disabled veteran exemption.
You do not have a conflict. And, yeah, and Larry's 70. He's not here. So, no, like I said, I do not feel, and I'm a senior also. The exemption and the burden that this would put on the rest of the taxpayers is inappropriate at this time in the financial situation of our community. And I do not support raising the exemption on there. This has come up before and it'll come up again, but it'll be interesting to see whether we proceed. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do support increasing a senior exemption. However, with some modifications, I actually believe that exemptions in some capacity, and I just kind of want to work this out loud, so bear with me. I believe that exemptions should be sliding scale based. I believe that if you have the socioeconomic means to support a full tax palette, then you should. And I also believe that if you do not have the socioeconomic means to support a full taxation, you should not. I don't know the best way to do that. We are not asking for tax returns and things of that nature. However, I believe that we still owe some order of fairness to the seniors that live here in Kodiak. I can tell you that growing up here in Kodiak, I am really happy to see some that are still here. Some not so much, but some very much. And so, you know, one of the things that keeps me in Kodiak is the fact that my kids are friends with the older adults that I was friends with. And I see that at the paintball field every weekend. And it is so inspiring to see that generation giving to the next generation. I believe that we owe it to our seniors that have longevity, that are here in Kodiak, some mechanism, and maybe a blanket exemption like this is not the right mechanism, but I think that we have enough knowledge and information and legacy information about what's going on in the borough. I think that collectively we can come up with a solution to do this. Thank you.
Dave. Bo, did you have your hand up?
Sure, I'll take it.
Okay, so Dave, Bo, then Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the work that went into this. I agree with the mayor that a $1.1 million addition of tax burden to everyone else isn't palatable. But I also agree that there's a better way to do this. You know, the state mandates the exemption we have. You know, my biggest concern in our community right now is the struggling families who are really, you know, at all ages, or you know, a lot of people are struggling. And so one thing that I had thought of potentially as a quasi-means tested way to go about something along these lines is, and let me finish the sentence before anyone throws anything at me, raise the mill rate, but exempt the first $100,000 of assessed build value for everybody. So if you have a $300,000 house, you're only paying $300,000 in assessed built construction value, you're getting a pretty good discount. If that's a $900,000 house, not so much, you're going to pay a little more. But that would spread the burden to, or ease the burden on the lowest assessed valued properties in the borough.
Bo.
That's an interesting perspective, and I struggle with this one as well, because we've had a lot of discussions about increasing funding for various components of the community that we're responsible for based on cost of living increases, right? Inflation proofing our local services. How is this any different? In my opinion, everyone is struggling. So if I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just pointing out that we do have discussions and have had many discussions about increasing funding for many areas of our municipal government because of the cost of living increase here and inflation. I think not considering this based on the tax burden is lightly hypocritical of us. And that there are folks, but I am sensitive to, there's some people here who are are exempt that are probably the most wealthy in the community. But there are people who do need this that aren't getting. Social Security increase was, I think, 2%, the most recent increase, somewhere around there. Not even close to supporting a senior on a fixed income living here that doesn't have a huge pension or doesn't have millions of dollars in assets. They just live here, and they actually stayed here. I don't know how many people say, oh, when I'm, reach a certain age, I'm out of here. These people are here because they want to be here. They deserve to be here, but I agree with some statements that I think across the board exemption increase doesn't solve that, but I do think we should spend more time in seeing what an alternative solution would be, because there are people who do need that help. we're at the senior center not too long ago. Dr. Smotley was there as well. I'm sure those discussions happened at his table. They certainly did at mine. People are struggling here. And, you know, whether the suggestion of basing it on total assessed value and adjusting that with the mill rate, that's a creative proposal. I do think we should give more thought into this. I don't agree with the blanket increase either, but there are people who do need some help in this area, and if we're gonna support increasing revenue for other sectors of the community, why on earth would we not do it for these folks as well? I mean, it's all about fairness. We need to apply borough resources equitably to everyone in the community.
Steve?
My reason for originally signing on with this was not that this was necessarily a blanket answer, but to get it in front of us to discuss. There are several seniors that aren't wealthy. There are some wealthy and they can afford the tax, whatever. But there are several that aren't, but their property taxes have gone up purely because their property value has gone up. But like Jared said, Social Security has not gone up. Most people, if you're on a retirement, you're on a flat number. We're not like Congress where it's adjusted to the cost of living, so we just get a flat number. So there are some of those people here who their tax burden over the last few years have gone up, definitely, because their property value went up a bunch. And this has been in place for several years at 150, and a lot of property value has gone up, so it's a way to help them. How best to make this fair, I'm not sure. As I said, my reason when James asked me for agreeing was, let's get this on the table and talk about it. So I'm also very welcome to hear other suggestions and alternatives. Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would love to get some more information from your idea, Assemblymember Johnson, because we've asked staff and the manager to prepare various scenarios over the course of the last year with ideas, and although I don't want to ask for undue, assignments, I believe this is one that hasn't been brought forth before that I can recall, and I believe that we owe at least some illustration to the Assembly to consider another idea. So at this time, I actually support at least the concept of this, but I couldn't support a universal increase as it is presented to us at this time. Thanks.
Steve?
Correct me again if I'm wrong, but from what I've heard and understand, your proposal has some merit, but we're required by state law to offer the 150, correct? So,
Yes.
therefore, seniors are going to get a minimum of 150 no matter what goes on around it. Okay, just making sure.
Seniors and disabled.
Correct, but we can't just suddenly switch to everybody gets the first 100. You got to give some of them 150 no matter what. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nova?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to let the Assembly members aware that there is a statute that says, and also our code has been changed, that says if someone requests an ordinance be placed on the agenda, that it automatically gets placed on the agenda. That's why I put a little notation in our agenda summary that if the sponsor who requested it retracts it, then it can be retracted and we're not placing it as an ordinance for introduction. So I would like to ask Assemblymember Ames, are you willing to retract this and not place it as an ordinance for introduction in the future, in the near future?
I'd like to see this move forward with a discussion and ideas on it. I'm afraid if it gets totally retracted, it might get under the shelf.
We don't have that choice.
Oh.
Either it comes forward right now as an ordinance,
Ordinance,
or
yeah.
you retract, and we can agree as a group to continue to look into it.
Okay, I will agree to retract as long as discussion moves forward, yes. I just don't,
It'll be on the agenda again.
okay, because I've seen too many times where it gets on, okay, we're going to change it, so we got to end it, but then the change takes forever to come back.
Amy, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, do you want staff to look into $1,000 off of all of the?
100,000.
Right, sorry, 100,000 off of all of the values, just so if your home is, if your notice of value is 800,000, then the taxable amount would be 700,000. And then my question is there an additional 150,000 exemption for seniors and disabled veterans on top of that 100,000?
Dave?
If it's all right with you, Mr. Mayor, I'll send Nova the spreadsheet I made to flesh this out, and then she can share it as she sees fit to Amy.
Amy. Give it to Amy.
If you send it to me, then I'll share it with the rest of the assembly members and also with the manager and staff.
The way I was interpreting what you said, Dave, was that it was 100,000 for everybody. And if you are a disabled vet or a senior, it's 150. They're not added together. Go ahead, Dave.
If I, yeah, and so what I did when, because I didn't want to spend the mental strength to convert mill rates, so I just used a percentage of home value. But if you reduce, say you have say the median home price in Kodiak's $500,000, the median build value is 500,000, and the average property tax is 1%. Well, if we were to make the first 100,000 of assessed build value automatic rebate, but increase to 1.25% across the board, that $500,000 house is now paying, was it $6,000 a year instead of $5,000, but the $300,000 house is getting a $500 a year break.
Spreadsheet, gonna need information. Amy, for clarification. Then it'll be Bo and Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Jared then too.
I think that we're going to want to talk to assessing as well, because for the seniors and the disabled veterans, there is a process that they go through. Every single person comes in, they have to prove that they live here. Then assessing has to check it. They have to be eligible for the PFD. Like, we have a lot of things attached to that exemption. If we did that for every property owner here, we'd have to make sure that the owner of that house was here a certain amount of days a year for them to be eligible. And then I'd also want to look in, because it would be exemptions that are above the mandated amount. And maybe you'll know, Mr. Mayor, does the public have to vote on that?
We'd have to get the attorney's opinion on there. So, what I have for speaking is Bo, Steve, and Jared on there. So, right, and then Ryan? Okay. Bo, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest, before we task the manager and her staff, we continue to kind of flesh out what the proposal is first. I'm sensitive to tasking folks before we understand what the proposal is. Just a suggestion. I don't want to create work and then have to come back and understand the proposal and then retask, because we don't know exactly what we're talking about yet.
Steve?
Yes, we need to figure this out, and I think there's some legal things to be concerned, because if you give everyone 100,000, we'll just say, and then the seniors get 150, effectively, you're only giving them a 50,000, and that seems to me like you'd be breaking the state law.
No.
So therefore, if you automatically give everybody 100, and the seniors only get 150, we'll say, then you're not meeting, they're only getting 50,000 more than the average person in town, and I'd have a real concern how that lines up with state law mandating 150.
Jared, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, just want to make sure we also keep in mind that this is a ledger that we need to balance, right? So if we're looking at 1.1 and possibly more with a blanket exemption across the board, what's going to come out the other side of that balance sheet? What are we going to lose? What are we going to trim? As far as my experience working with the borough budgets the past couple years, it's already pretty trim, and so I think any proposals, for me at least, any proposals that come up regarding exemptions need to be able to address in some way what's going to happen to the other side of the ledger. I'm not opposed to looking at exemptions and having discussions about them, but I would just not have. I just don't like the idea of being forced into. Now we have to figure out this whole other side of the ledger, thinking we've solved it on one side. And then the other thing is, and this is also a question to the Assembly and maybe also to Amy, is if something like this did pass and go forward, how would that really affect, what was it, the MAPR, the maximum allowable tax, property tax revenues? While staff is analyzing some of these scenarios, can we look at also what would happen, the following year, knowing that our property tax revenue would be capped in some way going forward? I think I just need a clearer picture about what would happen afterwards regarding our revenue with all these various scenarios that we're talking about.
Amy.
Jared, I think that's a good question, and I'm particularly worried about how that relates to, we would collect $100,000 or $150,000 less of property tax based on the notice of values, but the school funding window is based on the full notice of values. So as that notice of value goes up, that school window shifts to the right, and we historically have funded pretty close to the cap. So if we're collecting a lot less property tax and that window is shifting to the right, we're going to have more of a gap between what we will be able to afford to fund and run the borough government versus where we're at now.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too. Thanks, Amy.
Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that we've all brought up some very good, valid points. I can agree with everything that has been said so far, but I also want to urge caution. What we've been doing in the past, in my opinion, hasn't been working as efficient as it should, and so all I'm asking for is another analysis of another potential idea that has not been reviewed. We're not asking to vote on that and move it forward. We're asking for simply a number or numerical review on Mr. Johnson's idea so that, again, it's another lens, and I appreciate the fresh perspective and the willingness to try new ideas and put your idea out there. So I appreciate it, and I think that we at least need to look at the numerical impact before we even continue down this road. Thank you.
Bo and then Steve.
I agree. I think we're going too far down the road of this hypothetical scenario without understanding what it is. So I would suggest we move on and wait until we see what Mr. Johnson has to share with us, and then that way we're not taking up any staff time.
Steve.
Basically, I'm agreeing. Let's see exactly the proposal, and then even before we see the financial impact, I think we need to make sure we're not getting into a legal issue with the state mandate. Because there's no point in them spending all that time if it's going to go, oh, you can't do that by the state rules. And as I said earlier, I think there's a serious question there. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is we're interested in what you've come up with, Dave, to give to Amy to then get back or Nova to get back to us, and we'll set this up for another work session and see what we can do. Is that okay? I'm seeing head shake, so we'll move ahead with that.
Can I say one thing?
Go ahead, Steve.
Also, if anyone else has any plan or idea, I'd be welcome to hear it at that same work session.
Okay. So next, moving on, will be the solid waste contract revisions discussion. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through Resolution 2024-12, the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly formed a solid waste contract committee to assess and address inconsistencies and ambiguities in the solid waste contract. In collaboration with borough staff, the Solid Waste Contract Committee and borough attorney offered an amended division to the contract that was drafted to rectify key issues within the existing agreement. Following the work session on September 12th, when the drafts were first presented to the Assembly postponed discussion to provide ample time review. However, during the October 17th regular meeting, they indefinitely postponed further consideration of the draft, instructing staff to return with a minimally revised version to reduce the scope of edits that were made and ensure the contract's continuity throughout its term. In response to this directive, staff and borough attorney reviewed the existing contract as amended by Amendment 1, which happened in March of 2021, and determined it largely aligns with the Assembly's direction from October 17th. Accordingly, staff is now presenting Amendment 2, which incorporates only 3 small changes. The first one is annual reporting date being changed from February 15th to April 30th. That better aligns with the annual adjustment due date. The second one is shortening the number of days in which a commercial container will be removed for non-payment from 90 days down to 60 days. And we'd like to add an appendix. You have a flow chart in there. That would be Appendix A. It's a flow chart that describes standard services per the contract as it was amended by Amendment 1.
Ryan?
I love this. I don't have anything to add to this. I think that this is exactly what we need to get started. And I appreciate all the time that not only staff has put into this, but also with citizen comment. I think 3 small minor changes are very palatable, and I support this as it's presented. Thank you.
Bo?
Thank you. I agree. Thank you for the work. This was a quick turnaround, so we appreciate that. And you always do such a fantastic job of just making it easier for us to understand. This is a very complex contract, so thank you for trimming it down to something we can understand a little better, because we are not the subject matter experts. You certainly are. So thanks for bridging that gap for us. You did a great job.
Okay. Seeing no other comment, we'll move on to the, Amy.
Mr. Mayor, right now, this is just a agenda item. It isn't scheduled for a future meeting, so can we put that on a future meeting?
I figure we'll do that tomorrow.
I know, but I like it when the Assembly says yes.
I love that idea.
Thank you.
That's what I took as the intent here to begin with.
Mr. Mayor, does that mean that it's added to next week's agenda?
No,
Next meeting's agenda? Next regular meeting's agenda, not
After,
next week?
right.
Okay, thank you.
so then we'll get into packet review, which we have a ordinance number FY 2025-8, an ordinance of the Kodiak Island Borough accepting and appropriating grant funds for the 2020/2021 statewide salmon disaster. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce declared a statewide salmon disaster for the 2020-2021 fishery disaster that affected all species of salmon in certain areas of Alaska. Consequently, disaster funds were allocated to address losses to the affected salmon management areas. The Kodiak Island Borough has been notified of eligibility to receive $25,255 to compensate for lost income due to the effects of the fishery disaster that season. This ordinance is in accordance with Kodiak Island Borough Code 3.25.040.c, which requires that grant funds which are unlimited as to use or subject only to general limitations be appropriated by ordinance and include the appropriate budget amendment. You will see in the ordinance tonight that we have that money going into our capital project fund that will make it so if we do not spend that money this year, it will remain in there. Dora has created a fisheries development fund inside of our capital project fund. So if we get more funds, we can add it to that same account, or if we don't spend those funds, then it will remain there for future years until we do use it.
Any questions? Bo?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for supporting that concept. We've had some recent meetings. I won't be here to, I'll let Mr. Griffin fill folks in on our most recent fisheries work group meeting, but thank you to Manager Williams and her staff for making sure these are set aside to support fisheries. So I'm glad to see that is happening.
Okay, then next item would be Deputy Presiding Officer election. This is election of the 2024 through 2025 Borough Assembly Deputy Presiding Officer. And with what I just heard with 3 members being out, I think it needs to be postponed on there. Nova, what's your...
Mr. Mayor, I think we can do that. We can move it to the November 21 meeting. The code says that the Assembly shall annually, at the November meeting, elect from its members the Deputy Presiding Officer to serve at the Assembly's pleasure. So we have another meeting in November, which is November 21. So I think we'll still be within the parameters of the code.
Yeah, I'm just looking at with 3 people being out, it would be best to have a fuller assembly. Ryan?
Do we want to discuss interest while we have the majority of people here so that discussion can resonate during that time?
I think you already did that at the last meeting, from what I heard. Bo?
May I take a bite?
Take a bite.
All right. So I won't be at that meeting either. I'll be in Dutch Harbor during that week. So I want to, if he is willing to put his name in the hat again, will thank Dr. Smiley for volunteering his time, but since he is, as I understand it, communicated he's ready to pass the torch, I would like to place my support behind Mr. Griffin. I feel that if he's willing to do it, of course, that he is empathetic. I think he is very courteous and takes the time to understand differing perspectives and is just very eager to gain perspective on both sides of any of the issues or topics we're discussing. So I would place my support behind Mr. Griffin, although I won't be able to do that via a vote.
Next week, but potentially on November 21st you would be here.
I will be in Dutch Harbor.
On both the 7th and the...
I'll be in Montana next week.
Oh, okay.
Busy month for me.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would also like to put my name in the hat for the DPO position. Those that would be interested in my position, I would be looking at the DPO position more so from a executive management standpoint in creating mechanisms to provide organizational behavior and employee management to our only 2 employees, specifically through increased employee evaluations and varying metrics that would be clearly defined rather than what we've done in the past. So, thank you.
Jared?
Thank Bo for that, and yeah, I am certainly interested in the DPO. Also, the primary responsibilities are running meetings, and I run a bazillion meetings, and so I think I could run a pretty good, effective meeting. So I will put my name out there also.
Okay. So I think we have two moving forward, but we'll be looking at the November 21st regular meeting to do it. So with that, we'll move on to the next one is contract number FY 2025-27, snow and ice control for Bayview and Menasha Bay service area with AIM Maintenance. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The borough was informed by Brecken Enterprises that they are no longer interested in being a contractor for service areas. In response, borough staff initiated the preparation of a bid package to secure a contractor for the Bayview and Menasha Bay service areas for the upcoming winter months. The engineering staff, in collaboration with the borough attorney, drafted and reviewed the invitation to bid package, which was advertised on September 30th in accordance with KIB Code 3.30.040. The bid invitation was open for the required 3-week period with an initial submission deadline of October 22nd, 2024. This deadline was later extended to October 25th, 2024 via an addendum. At the bid opening, 2 packages were submitted, and upon review for compliance, it was determined that AIM Maintenance LLC was the sole responsible bidder. Staff recommend awarding the contract to AIM Maintenance LLC to ensure snow and ice control services coverage for Bayview Menasha Bay service areas for the winter season. And our Engineering and Facilities Director, Dave Conrad, is here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Ryan, you got a question right now, or wait? Okay. Dave, go ahead.
As I will add to what Amy stated, that we were told to get this out because of the 11th hour that was before us with pending winter. So we put this contract out based on previous contract. I know there has been discussion asked, and there's some concern over the self-dispatch. I believe that if in the spirit of this contract, there are other portions that I believe allows them to operate the way they did. The concern is that the contractor will automatically self-dispatch. The contractor will participate with the service area boards. When I was the chair, I would contact the contractor the day that I knew, the time I knew there was a forecast for snow. And we would have a conversation previous to that. So if there's predicted snow tomorrow, I would be having a conversation today. This contract as written allows for that, and that's really what these guys want. I do believe that this is a short-term contract. There is a concern also expressed to me about grading. There's no reason that we could not hire a contractor for a specific task for grading a road when necessary come March, April, when this is nearing its end. The goal in this whole thing is to have all the service area contracts looked at and out for July 1 of next year, so it can start with the fiscal year. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I believe Mr. Sherritt had a question about the notary, and we did indeed talk with the attorney, and the attorney said that a out-of-state notary is indeed legal.
Ryan, you had your hand up.
Thank you. So I do not support this as presented, and I'm going to go over a couple reasons. So number one, in our RFP, Section 8, quality control, contractor shall establish a quality control program. It goes into 3 bullet points. The contractor's quality control program as presented does not meet or satisfy all 3 of those. There are inconsistencies in the contracts between Section 1C and 1D. The contract lists recommendations, not requirements. Section 7 needs to match the contractor's intent. Section 10 outlines invoices to be separate. I believe that this should have been bid separately. One of the larger discussion points, and I still have not received a resolve on, is whether or not the Davis-Bacon Act applies to this. I know that I've asked multiple times for the written attorney's opinion, and I've not yet received that. The pre-award qualification checklist was not completed and endorsed by the reviewer. Cost plus 30% is a little outside of the norm, and we heard public testimony today that self-dispatch is not a desired function or feature, and whether or not it is your intent, that is not what the contract states, and we live and die by the contract words. So I can't support this contract as it's listed right now, and we certainly won't create a mechanism where we are going to put ambiguity while we're trying to remove ambiguity borough-wide. We're not going to create a mechanism that just wipes out all of the efforts that we just did, no matter what the haste of releasing this contract was. I have to tell you that as a government entity, I think we need to do better. I think we need to set a better example, and this RFP and this contract fails to meet that criteria. Thank you.
Bo.
Thank you. So if we were to reject the bid based on concerns and then repackage this and put it back out, what would our timeline, what timeline were we looking at if we didn't accept this as written? Because I do have some concern that if we kick this down the roadways, that there's folks in this service area that aren't going to get the servicing they need. If snow, I mean, we could have snow in a week. We have, I've had a lot of snow this time of year. So I'm curious. I'm kind of getting a little long-winded about just asking the question. If we reject it now, what kind of timeline will we be looking at with an amended RFQ or ITB?
3 weeks minimum advertising, and then whenever it would be scheduled by the mayor and the manager.
Okay, thank you. May I continue?
Go ahead.
So, I agree, there's some concerns that have been brought to us that I'm trying to be mindful of here. Do we, as an assembly, feel that those concerns outweigh the time-sensitive nature of this contract and coupled with the short duration that this is one just through May 31st of next year? This one's really difficult for me because of that reason. There is room for improvement, I agree with that, but is that going to outweigh the time-sensitive nature and the short duration of the contract?
Anyone have a response, Dave?
I don't have a response. I believe that this is in a condition that with some reasonableness, I know that's probably not going to be taken well, but with some reasonableness, this can be effective. Our concern is more about the health and safety of the individuals that live in those service areas. If they have been able to contact the contractor in the past and dispatch as they choose, I believe that there is language in here that allows for that and actually promotes it.
Okay. I'm doing what Nova tells me not to do, and that's count votes. And this is going to be with only 4 members here on it. So, Ryan?
So I'm going to utilize my second bite. I wanted my first bite to resonate. My second bite at this is that I would suggest strongly that the staff enter into a negotiated agreement with the only responsive bidder, satisfy the quality control requirements as outlined in the RFP, strike the things that should not be in this contract, such as self-dispatch, and I would encourage the staff to work with the service district as a body and develop a short-term contract that actually meets the requirement of the service district and bind it.
Happy to do that.
May I continue? So you have solicited under an RFP, a request for a proposal. You already have accepted a responsible party because it wasn't an ITB. There's no protest period for an RFP. So you can absolutely enter into an agreement as a proposal that modifies the terms of the contract. I would suggest that you enter into those agreements. I would suggest that you enter into a notice of intent to award as published, knowing that you're going to modify the RFP into the terms and provisions that you actually need as a service district's requirements.
Understood?
Okay, then you might have something you can pass next week. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Forgive me, because this is my first service contract.
Go for it.
I'm having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around the last comment, only because if my fellow assembly member finds the quality control plan to not meet the requirements of the contract, RFP, would that not, because from looking at the handout, the bid that was 40% less wasn't considered because it failed to include a quality control program. So are we saying we're going to allow a bid that was 40% more to fix a non-compliant quality control program and remain the only bid? That's just my ignorance of the process.
Ryan?
Thank you. So the staff has made the determination that one was not filed at all, and the other was filed, and they deemed it satisfactory. I disagree with that finding. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that a second party did not file one. So in the, I guess, tone of this conversation, I'm disagreeing with staff on a representative quality control meeting the requirements of page 4 of 8 of the contract RFP as it was published. They are attesting to the fact that it does meet it. So what I'm suggesting is that we revise what we're asking from the contractor to still perform the duties, but as they're performing those duties, or as they're preparing to enter negotiations for those duties, we ask for the contractor to make a more robust presentation that meets the letter of section I, II, and triple I of the RFP. Does that answer your question? Okay. Let me try it again.
No, if I might, it doesn't, only because from what all I have is what was, put in the packet. And so it says one of the two bids, no package missing required quality control program. But if you're saying the one that was presented also fails to meet the required quality control program, wouldn't they both fail? That's what I'm having a hard time getting my head wrapped around is,
Yep,
if we're
roger.
saying we can't even consider one because it didn't meet the requirements, but we'll tweak the one that also didn't meet the requirements.
And my position, may I continue?
Go ahead.
So my position remains unchanged. So the staff has determined that one of them has met the qualifications. I don't necessarily agree with it, but we aren't voting on the qualifications of the QC program. We're debating the qualifications of, or I'm sorry, we're debating the validity of the award at this point. I have a position that the QC program doesn't meet the intent of the RFP. There are several deficiencies in the contract as well. My recommendation is to enter negotiations with the only determined responsive contractor to flesh out the details that need to be ironed out between the provisions of the contract and the provisions of the QC program. If we were going to approach this from a purely disqualification of the QC program, I would throw away all bids because the contract is actually written incorrectly. So, and I'm asking the staff to enter negotiations and revise contract and QC.
Bo?
Thank you. My preference is, I don't support rejecting this entirely and then restarting the clock. I think we need to take the residents in mind as the priority, albeit there's some concerns with the contract. My preference would be if there is room to negotiate within the bounds of the current proposal, that would be my preference. I don't support starting over, despite some concerns that I do agree with. But I'm placing the residents' safety and well-being in mind, and that worst case is lessons learned, areas for improvement for the next RFP that is coming not too long from now. We can use this as a learning opportunity to improve the process next time around. That would be a reasonable compromise, in my opinion. Let's use these suggestions perhaps to inform the next one, to maybe clean up our process a little bit, but I'm sensitive to the timeline here. I think we have snow coming any day now. We can't put this off too much longer.
Scott?
I'm in agreement with Mr. Whiteside.
Okay. Steve, we're going to have you wait a minute. I have serious problems with the whole process of a lump sum bid on this. I think, and I'd be interested in hearing from the service districts, typically we've done it, which I heard some say they preferred the way we've been doing it, which is by the hour. We pay by the hour and by the ton for sanding, on sanding, grading, whatever we're doing. The different storms require different things. I see, and I'd like to see the other bidder. We used his average, but average is devil's in the details, and don't have what he bid on this. We see on the one bid, on the bid schedule here, that basically it's the same amount for 2 inches through 12 inches on there. I know for a fact with Service District 1, in one snowstorm, we may be out grading 3 times for pulling the snow to the side. And then we're sending a loader, if it's a major storm, to clean driveways on there. I don't see that on here. It's assuming, there's a bunch of assumptions here that I think are a problem. It's a flat rate, and you're going to pay whether you have a light sanding or you're going to ask for a heavy sanding, but the contractor doesn't have to give you that. There are times when we're anticipating where it's going to turn to rain, where I may give the contractor for Service District 1 the instructions, I want the road black. I don't want to see the ice. And we pay for that accordingly. So I'd like to hear what the consideration is. When I'm hearing negotiating, I hear that potentially negotiating we could come up with hourly rates. Or I would refer that to Ryan, whether or not, well, okay, well, I have a serious problem with this. So, Bo?
Right, and again, I appreciate the concerns that have, and this has been very, very good discussion, but, none of these contracts set precedent that we can't modify for the next one. So again, I'm just reminding folks that this is a short duration. I agree there's room for improvement. I'm still encouraging folks to think about it as ways we can improve the next RFP. If we have time to get back, bring this back to the table with the potential awardee, that's great, but this isn't a life sentence. If we aren't happy with some of these terms or language in this contract, that doesn't mean that this sets precedent and that we can't change the language for the next RFP. So I'm still just encouraging folks to think about what's truly important here, and that's getting folks the service they need. If we can improve the process going forward, then let's take that as the win here, and that we have some ideas on how to move forward for the next one.
Steve and then Ryan?
Okay, forgive me because I don't know all the legal details, but without starting at ground zero, is it possible to say we only had 2 bidders, neither one fully met? Can they both repropose and therefore come up with a decision quickly? And I don't know the legalities behind that. Because I do have a problem with just negotiating with one when he didn't meet the terms, and neither did the other one, but they're blown out of the water. It's just a personal feeling that you're changing the contract after the bid. And I've been involved where that's happened before in my business, and the terms of the bid changed after the fact, and it would have greatly changed my bid if I had known that information.
Ryan?
So one significant difference from this is a bid versus a proposal. A proposal is written for prescriptive methods, right? So you say this is how we're going to do it, not descriptive, which is what a bid is. A descriptive proposal, or I'm sorry, descriptive solicitation says you're going to do A, B, and C. Proposal means we need this done, however you do it. So those are two different contracting mechanisms, but the reason I wanted to talk again, I'm going to do something probably a little unorthodox, and I guess I'll just ask for forgiveness if this doesn't work. We do have the service districts here, so I guess if the service districts gave me a thumbs up that they're okay with this contract and the spoken agreement that Mr. Conrad has presented, I will withdraw my concerns and we'll just move this forward. If I didn't get a thumbs up, then my concerns would stay in place and I would vote no on this. So I guess I would just collectively look for their service district's thumbs up or thumbs down on moving this forward with an understanding that the contractor and the facilities engineer will work together to make this work.
With the concurrence of the assembly, I'd like to hear from the service districts. Any objections? Okay, Fred, you first, you had your hand up.
Okay, so Jeremy here, he is the apparent successor bidder. Let's talk with him. I think he's pretty reasonable. We could do what Mr. Sherritt originally recommended. We can kind of work out the little details. Is that okay? We hear from him?
Yeah, that'd be a little bit of a problem from the service districts, but, so,
Okay, from my point of view, I would agree with one of Mr. Sherritt's original recommendations, is that we kind of work out the details in there, enter kind of negotiations.
okay. And Menasha Bay?
For the record, Chair Menasha Patrick O'Donnell, I think we're sort of at the 11th hour here, and I understand where Mr. Sherritt wants to go with this, and I don't disagree. However, my concern is that getting this late into the year, and you know, we had this big northwest windstorm earlier than normal. We end up with snow, and we don't have a contract in place. I'm concerned about delaying this 3-4 weeks down the road and possibly getting stuck. Now, I have a backhoe, but I found out I'm not allowed to use it and clear the roads, but that's my concern. So right now, I think we should move ahead with what we have, and there's a few details maybe to be worked out, and we have the bidder here in the room, and it may be a conflict this time, but I think it should be talked about, and so we have a clear understanding moving forward, other than just having language on paper that we're going off of. I think, you know, our concern was with item 3 there, and I don't remember the language, but self-dispatch. I mean, we've worked with these guys. Tom is very good about getting a hold of me and getting a hold of the Brecken in the past, and watching the weather and getting, you know, a vehicle out there, not in the middle of a snowstorm, but after the snowstorm. So we're not going to grade and gravel and get 2-3 inches of snow. You've just wasted time, money and effort on that. But right now, I think we need to move. I'm concerned with time. I'm concerned for safety. Three Sisters is a bit of a disaster when you get a little bit of snow down there. And I think we need to get something in place. So I'm all for moving ahead with what we have right now and then look to doing something different and better in 2025. And I think one of the things we need to get in place is, depending on the term of the contract, is to have a 90-day or 60-day notice if in the case Brecon didn't want to take up the contract here for this coming winter, that we have time and space to deal with the issue rather than, 30-day notice where we're in this situation right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, go ahead and come.
Jim Carmichael, Bayview Road District. There's really only two issues that I think we see, and I think I'm speaking for Minoska as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom and Patty. First is or clause 3A, and that could easily be stricken. I don't see any issue there at all, and I don't know where Jeremy is on that. The other issue is a strong preference for time and materials as opposed to the lump sum. And again, I think we're all in concurrence on that from the road district. And again, I don't know where Jeremy is on that. But if we can resolve those two issues quickly, then we could proceed for this year without a problem. I think most of us have worked with Jeremy before and hold him in high regard in terms of responses. The biggest issue in a practical sense for us, and I say us because we collaborate a lot, is just being responsive on getting gravel out there timely when you've got when you're getting some ice on there with a little rain on top of it, and all of a sudden you're going for a really fun ride down some of those hills. And if we can do that, we've got some anecdotal stories from the past that illustrate what happens when you don't get that gravel out there quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Ryan.
Mr. Conrad, was there a weighted average placed on the bid schedule as presented?
No, there was not.
I'm going to have to defer to the attorney's opinion on modification from bid schedule as per occurrence versus hourly. We need to emphasize that this is an RFP rather than an ITB. If we can get the attorney's concurrence on that and to enter the negotiations, then I would support the comments that we heard tonight.
The hourly.
Going to an hourly and a per ton basis, and doing so with the responsive bidder. But again, we need to emphasize that this is an RFP, not an ITB. That is the succinct difference here. If we can get that attorney's opinion before next week.
Thursday.
Yeah, if we can get that pushed out as soon as possible, then I would withdraw my concerns if we can enter those negotiations. Thank you.
And it also sounds like the service district is interested in that negotiation too. Bo.
I just wanted to thank the Service District folks for being here and willing to enter discussion with Mr. Conrad and the potential awardee. Thank you for being here as well. I think this is a great thing that you are all here and we're willing to find some middle ground to get this done now. Thank you for bringing your concerns forward and Mr. Sherritt for continuing to lend your expertise in the area of contractual language and limitations. So thank you all for being here. This is great that you all are here at the same time and we can get this tuned up here and get it done so folks can get the service they need.
Okay. Enough direction given. This will be before you on Thursday next week. Okay, moving on to the next thing is resolutions. Resolution number FY 2025-10, accepting grant funds from the Denali Commission for the purpose of updating the Kodiak Island Borough Solid Waste Management Plan and related regional planning activities. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Denali Commission solicited statements of interest for regional solid waste management planning support for rural communities. Comprehensive regional strategies for waste management are lacking in many parts of Alaska, even as some regions have relied increasingly on common waste management facilities over time. These facilities are often inadequate as they were originally designed to serve a different purpose. At the same time, operations could often be safer and more efficient. Other parts of Alaska lack any recognition. Regionalization of solid waste management planning processes at the regional scale may offer opportunities to realize efficiencies and leverage shared interests and resources for long-term solutions to waste management challenges. The Commission announced the availability of funds for regional solid waste management planning. The announcement commits up to $1.5 million for this purpose. Respondents may request up to $500,000. The Kodiak Island Borough partnered with the Kodiak Area Native Association to submit a request for a total of $500,000. That included work being done by the two entities separately and also together. KIB requested $250,000 for the update of the solid waste management plan. The Denali Commission has provided notification that the Kodiak Island Borough is eligible to receive their requested funding amount of $250,000 to move forward with the solid waste plan update and other regional solid waste activities. And this is that resolution method when we get grant money, because it's going to a specific purpose. It's just through a resolution, and the next item on the agenda is the same way.
Any discussion or questions? Okay. Next is resolution number 2020.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I had to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jared. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead, Jared.
Totally fine. Just a couple things. One, just want to point out, good things happen when we partner up with organizations on big grant projects. Partnerships are extremely important for us. Good vibes go a very, very long way. My next point is a question for Amy. Do you know what is CANA's piece of this?
Yes, they will be looking at all of the off-road system areas, specifically the villages and how they're handling their solid waste.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Next is resolution FY 2025-11, a resolution of the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly accepting 2023 state and local cybersecurity grant program funds in the amount of $227,997. Staff report, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The state and local cybersecurity grant program is a federally funded pass-through grant program that provides funding to eligible entities to address cybersecurity risks and threats to information systems owned or operated by or on behalf of state, local, or tribal governments. Borough staff submitted an application requesting funding for 2 computer network security improvement projects, and notice has been received that the Kodiak Island Borough has been allocated $227,997 in support of those projects. In your packet tonight, you'll see that resolution, and then there's also a list of what other communities across the state got through this program.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to other items. First one is rescinding the approval of contract number FY 2024-38 with Otis Elevator Company for elevator maintenance services. Staff report, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 27, 2024, the Borough Assembly awarded contract fiscal year 2024-38 to Otis Elevator Company. Since that time, the Kodiak Island Borough Engineering and Facility staff has been actively engaged in contract negotiations to finalize the agreement. However, on September 10, 2024, Otis submitted an email proposing additional conditions that the KIB was unable to accept. With negotiations at an impasse, the KIB sought guidance from the borough attorney. Following the borough attorney's legal advice, the engineering and facility staff decided to cancel the bid per Section 2, Part 18, named bid cancellation, of the invitation to bid. This decision was further supported by the fact that it has been over a 45-day time limit for executing the contract after the award has passed. While the KAB code permits awarding the contract to the next responsible bidder, both the borough attorney and the KAB staff agree that rebidding the contract would ensure greater transparency and a cleaner process. Since the Assembly had formally awarded the contract by vote on June 27, 2024, the KAB engineering facility staff now request the Assembly to rescind the award, officially canceling both the award and the contract.
And our engineering and facilities director is here to answer any questions that you might have.
Dave, what went astray?
So both firms that bid offer what are called tiered packages. And the tiered package was initially attractive and was offered by Otis. When you started to get into negotiations and discussing what the tier packages were, all of a sudden they were deciding that they were going to omit certain items on an elevator if they were outdated. Their tiered package would not cover that, and they were going to charge a larger amount for those services as well as the items themselves. So if you have an Otis elevator that's 20 years old, if they have to procure a new activation arm, because they can't get the 20-year-old one, well, that doesn't fit into the tier package. All of a sudden, it's outside the tier package. So it became unattractive. The other thing, as negotiations went, the attorney worked with staff, this is while I was gone, to talk with Otis Elevator to see if they would be willing to entertain a contract that was written by the borough. They refused to sign that contract. So it just kept being prolonged and back and forth to the point where the attorney said, you're better off just going out and putting it out again and not going for that tiered package effectively, is to go with a straight, just, this is what it is to maintain these elevators. The other thing we have heard since then with discussions with Providence is that they are having similar issues in that they are, this particular firm at times was looking at doing upgrades all the time rather than trying to actually perform repairs. So with all of that put together, we're of the belief that we should go out again, not go for a tiered package, go for straight maintenance and the required testing that's required by the state of Alaska.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Anyone else have any questions? Ryan?
Don't worry, 23 more months and I'm off the assembly. So what you described to me as an RFP process, you described a tier package that was comparable to another, but that is the purest definition of request for proposal. I need to emphasize again that an invitation to bid is a descriptive mechanism that says we want this, this, and this, or just this. And I would just urge caution, and I tell from your nonverbal body language that, yep, you got it. However, when we're looking at bids versus proposals or IDIQs, I remember this discussion distinctly with the elevators, is having them as an IDIQ basis, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantification, that basically states time, materials, fixed margins, markups. So I would just caution us as we go back out for bid that we're using the mechanism that would legally bind them into provisions.
Dave?
So staff has already started to revise, and we're looking at an ITB rather than what was presented at this point, specifically removing any of the tiered packages so that we get straight numbers on this per task. We're 3/4 of the way through revising it already.
Okay. Any other questions? Staff? Okay. Moving on then to, next one is Assembly Review of the State of Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office Beverage Dispensary License Renewal Application for Blue Incorporated, doing business as B&B Bar, license number 85. Staff report, Nova?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Assembly. On September 23rd, we have received the renewal notice for this license for the B&B bar, and our investigation resulted in 20 trouble reports, and we have checked again, and so far, as of last week, there were 22 trouble reports for that location. The code says that we also check with the state troopers, or we actually check with the state troopers, and we have checked with the state troopers, and that investigation came back with 0 reports for that location because it's within the city. The code doesn't really give us a threshold that if it's this many, then you should be objecting. The code just says that if, based on my investigation, that there's this trouble reports, that I should be giving it to you for your review. So it's before you. You can either say, no, we're not objecting, this is normal, or yes, we should be objecting because of the number of trouble reports. So I'm leaving it up to you to make that decision.
Steve and then Scott.
Do we know of any other bars' recent history and how this compares to, say, the Mecca, the Village, Tony's, anything else?
I have a few examples based on the biannual list that we're working on right now. The Tony's Bar has more than 20 also, but all the other bars that we're checking on, they have like 7. Liquor stores probably would be 1 or 2. So I just kind of said that, 20 is a little bit on the higher end of the investigation that we're doing on different liquor licenses, that I just thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Scott, and then Ryan.
What time period were there 20 things?
A year.
A year. Thank you.
Ryan.
And a few other examples would be like Village Bar had 11 incidents the past year. Let's see here. Tony's Bar, 24 incidents. Safeway Millbury Branch, 7 incidents. Aquamarine, 1 incident. Cost Savers, 1 incident. Bernie's, 13 incidents. There's these 2 that were above 20. So,
Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be cautious about reviewing data without a rubric to gauge that data against. So we don't know what the societal norm is for a small community like this and what disturbances are. So my question is there any other deficiencies or issues that were identified from the clerk's office towards the applicant?
no, just the trouble reports.
Thank you.
Steve.
Do we have any idea what the definition of a troubled report is? I mean, some of them could be very minor and not mean anything.
Amy's got a comment.
Well, page 12 of the packet, or of that one, lists the dates and what all of they were.
I'll look more closely at that. Thank you.
Any other
And
questions?
maybe sometimes it's just not the number, it's the severity of the calls too. So I think you as an assembly have to make that decision and read the types or identify those ones that are concerning to you.
Any thoughts? Dave.
I think as a general position, I don't, I struggle trying to say that a business owner is responsible for the actions of their patrons. Obviously, there's over-serving and everything else that comes with it. B&B is right at the head of the ramp in St. Paul Harbor. Like, it's going to have more issues. Now, there was somebody who drowned in St. Paul Harbor 2 summers ago, and the last place they visited that night was the B&B. So there might be a question there worth asking. But I think in general terms, yeah, like, I would knowing that the B&B has a high number of callouts is in no way surprising, just given their proximity to the transient float and the fishing in the harbor.
Ryan.
Don't worry, 23 more months. I would just caution us to talk about the application rather than try to bring other incidences into this that would potentially border slanderous or slanderous-based actions. So I would just I would ask us to focus our conversation just strictly on the application and whether or not we have any grounds to file a letter of protest during their application, not on any unconnected issues that may not be on that list as presented in the packet.
Steve and then Bo.
I guess I'm agreeing with Ryan in the fact, and I also, it may be on the higher side, but it's within normal range in Kodiak, so I see no reason to complain. And so, at least my opinion is I'd vote to accept it, no protest.
Bo and then Scott.
Thank you. I agree. I think we should, I urge caution as well in trying to vilify any portions of our community or proximity to any sort of businesses. But I'm looking at the list on page 12, and I view this as granted, this is seemingly a higher amount than other establishments, but I think the vast majority of these were the business owner making the call to have someone who's behaving improperly removed from the premises. I mean, I view at least half of these as the business owner being responsible and getting that person calling the authorities to have them removed from the premises. So I'm not going to protest this. I appreciate highlighting it because does seem like a high number, but when looking at the individual contacts made with law enforcement, I believe that the establishment was acting on behalf of the other patrons and getting that person out of there.
Okay, Scott.
I think Mr. Johnson has brought out the salient point, which is just right at the end of the ramp. And people coming off fishing boats, having been out of town for a long while, are going to head to a watering hole. I'm not surprised that Tony's is the other one with high numbers either, but I agree with the other people that have said, let's just move this along.
Okay. Any further discussion? Nova.
Mr. Mayor and members of the Assembly, I would suggest that we leave it on the agenda so that there's something for the record. You can make the motion and you can fail the motion technically. And what I'll do then is that based on that action that you took, I'm going to write a letter to the ABC board saying that there's no objection from the Assembly. But I think we need to have some type of a record that it was presented to you. Okay. Thank you. And just to note that we've also been in contact with the owner of the bar or the license and letting them know that this is happening next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is confirmation of Assembly appointment to the Bayview Service Area Board of Mr. Sean Rawolf. He was on the board. He kind of ran as a write-in, but did not realize he had a file in the clerk's office as a write-in. So his were not allowed. And like I said, he was on the board up until the election. So I asked him to go ahead and fill out the application for it, and it's here before you for next week. That will then give them 3 full members out of a board of 5. So, any discussion or questions? Okay. Next is declaring a seat vacant on the Solid Waste Advisory Board. Ms. Carrie Irons, staff report, Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have received the resignation, and we ask that you declare it vacant so we have pending applications that we can appoint for the next meeting.
Okay. Any questions? Ryan.
can we force her to stay on there?
Not when she's on the school.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. The next is citizens' comments. Rob, if you'd like, you can speak again.
Folks gave me 15 minutes, I figured I'd bear it here with you.
Thank you. Oh, shoot, let me go. My mistake. I gotta go back to manager's comments.
Thank you,
Amy.
Mr. Mayor. I want to say welcome to our new assessment clerk. Juniper Roman started this week. So welcome to Juniper, and that makes assessing staff fully staffed again. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that the Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association, who is currently who we use as our insurer, and the Alaska Public Entity Insurance boards have both voted to continue with the merger to create a new community pool. The new pool would be named the Alaska Public Risk Alliance and would bring together two self-insurance programs that have been operating in Alaska for the past 40 years. There is a website if you have more questions about that merger. It is alaskarisk.org. Kodiak Island Borough will be given the chance to vote for or against the merger as a current member of AMLGIA. Our risk manager / finance director, Dora Cross, will be placing the vote for Kodiak Island Borough. If approved by both memberships on November 14th, 2024, the merger would become effective on July 1st, 2025. There have been a lot of questions around that, if it's going to make our insurance prices go up or down, and that's debatable, no matter who you talk to. Some current priorities that we're working on in the manager's office. We are working on creating a RFP template. If we're going to put out an RFP, we want all of the different departments to be using the same template. As was mentioned tonight, we're looking for service district contracts to be completely rewritten and start at the beginning of fiscal year 26. And we're working on project priorities for the summer months of 2025. Our Alaska Supreme Court case, oral arguments will be scheduled during the first week of December. Assessing Department Director and the manager are both scheduled to be present for both our case and Nome's case. Nome's case the oral arguments are one day, and then our case is the day right after that. So we're going to go up and learn about that. Mayor Art and I attended the annual dinner on Saturday, October 26th. We had guest speakers, Senator Stevens and the Kodiak Economic Development Corporation Board President Carl Hertz. I have the same information there for the last few weeks about the AML annual conference if you're interested for that. And we're still looking for an associate planner and a fiscal technician. We have had a college student who's just finishing up his program apply for the associate planner job, which is exciting, and we do have an application for the fiscal technician as well. In community development, we have river-focused staff, people that are going to be on the island the 4th through the 6th for the Hazard Mitigation Advanced Assistance Grant. I also posted a flyer for their visit in the Bells Flats community page. We have a lot of people who made comments and sent in pictures and videos to River Focus, so they'd have an idea of what that area looks like when we've had a lot of rain. In assessing, they're 90% complete in their Menashka, Bells Flats, Chiniak, and Passaic fieldwork. We are down to only 2 applicants to be determined for senior citizen and disabled veteran exemptions. There's a list of village travel dates there. Right now, all of those seats are full. If they can't go out on those original flights and they have to use an alternate date, SEMA is going to let the assembly know in case there are any empty seats. In our exemptions and assessing, there was a new application processed and sent out on October 10th. They have appealed to the assembly. The assembly will be sitting as the Board of Equalization under that code that we changed last year. One applicant participated in a reconsideration on September 24th. The borough responded on the 11th of October, and they have 30 days to appeal that reconsideration. And then we had one applicant appeal their reconsideration to Superior Court, and they filed that on October 11th. In engineering and facilities, the Architectural Review Board met and reviewed submissions for the architectural engineering services. An agenda item will be created to provide the information to the Assembly and the ARB recommendation for award consideration. The Kodiak Island Borough and contractor staff are so close on fixing the borough office lift station issues. Assemblymember Ames spent much of his day fixing our problem today, so thank you. We're going to test that out tomorrow morning, and when there's people here to watch it, and we should have use of those restrooms. It has been almost 5 weeks, and I think everyone is very excited to get those back working. Our RSA mechanical engineer has been on island. Colin Thompson performed the scheduled site visit for that boiler installation. He was here on that really windy day, so he got to see Kodiak in all of its glory, and then we wouldn't let him leave. So while he was here, we had him check every mechanical thing that we could think of. So it worked out not so good for him, but really good for us. At the KFRC, we are still waiting on our GSA representative for the required water testing that the GSA is requiring for that building. We're looking at additional electrical circuits for GSA consideration because NOAA wants to add additional chillers. They also completed a fume hood job. Because that engineer was here, we had a site inspection of that fume hood job, and he found some issues that should be fixed. And he's going to do a report from his visit here, and he will give us a list of things that need to be fixed for both that and the HVAC system at Peterson. At the landfill, Jenna is still working on the compliance order by consent associated with our stormwater violations. She's working on drafting an RFP for a well installation so we can find out more about that. The Baylor Building concrete floor contractor was scheduled to be on site today and was. The equipment will be staged and work is scheduled to begin November 4th. The Baylor facility is still closed. The Baylor rebuild is going very well. The gatherer will be installed by the end of the week, and completion of the Baylor should be done prior to the cure time for the concrete floor. The strapper consultant is anticipated to be on site November 24th. And if you are bringing solid waste to the landfill, there's a dumpster that's been placed out there for you to put it in instead of going into the Baylor building. Our commercial hauler will still be loose filling at the current landfill operating base. So they have to drive a little bit further than they're used to get the trash down there. And the staff still wanted to remind the public that there is an increase of bear activity at roll-off container locations, so please close the doors when you're done disposing of your stuff there. At the leachate treatment plant, our first two polymers that were provided did not give any significant impact, so we are testing a third sample. For the pretreatment upgrade project, the contractor is scheduled to be in town next week, and we're finally going to get those new pumps so we can head for that 200 gallons a minute. And staff has contacted a local vendor to perform the installation of a required seismic joint cover at the pretreatment plant. At the school district, there's three things all about the Peterson roof. We're going to start with a good one first. So the final Johns Manville inspection was held on October 28th and 29th. The warranty inspection was completed. The required alterations were made, and the 20-year Peak Advantage warranty has been received. So that's wonderful. Maintenance requirements are going to be given to the Kodiak Island Borough School District as recommended by the Johns Manville inspector. On October 29th, because we had our mechanical engineer here, we looked at the HVAC equipment. We found several discrepancies. The changes required have been verbally discussed with the contractor, but Mr. Thompson is going to write a written trip report and then give us a list of items to bring that up to speed. Also on October 29th, you may have remembered it was the very windy day, several sections of the flashing failed on the front face of the facility. Friend contractors responded to the report of damage, and they are discussing the required repairs associated with the warranty. They went back on the 30th to further investigate the failure of the roof manufacturer's recommended installation method and are coming up with ways to secure that flashing so we don't have that happen again. We talked about the snow removal and ice control for our service area. We also have a facility snow and ice control contract that is out right now, or the RFP for that is out right now, and it is anticipated to be awarded by November 21st at that regular meeting. In finance, for those who have made a timely first half payment of your property tax, the remaining second half payment is due on or before November 15th to avoid additional penalties and interest. if you are taking your payment to the post office, please walk it inside and have them stamp it. We have one family who brought their mail to the post office on October 15th for their full payment, but it doesn't get stamped here, it gets stamped in Anchorage. So they brought it on the 14th, which was a holiday. It didn't get shipped to Anchorage until the 15th. There were delays. It got stamped on the 18th. And so that was not timely, even though they brought it on the 14th. So if you're bringing it to the post office, please go in and have it hand stamped while you're there. We are still working on a few final things on the 24 audit. Management's discussion, analysis, and statistical sections are still requiring some more work. In information technology department, they are continuing with their security audit. The IT staff is having a meeting with auditors. The last thing that they have been talking, or the most recent thing they've been talking about, is wireless security. They have completed the two-factor authentication in the Microsoft 365 environment. They've also created a new secure wireless network for KIB staff. When you're logging on, you'll see a wireless network that's KIB, and the KIB staff one is secure and allows us to enter Laserfish and our Borough drives through wireless, which has been really nice if you're working with a laptop. The IT department is also developing an approval workflow for their help desk software to make sure that they are meeting the needs of their customers as well as possible. I think there's only one laptop that has to be picked up by the assembly now. In software, they are looking at Microsoft System Center Operations Manager. They're looking for a solution to be proactive with identifying issues with servers and workstations. Over the weekend, we had a spammer of some sort make it into our system, and if you were signed up for updates on the architectural review board, there's some people who got like 800 emails over the course of a couple of hours. So on Sunday morning, we had a resident text me and say, help. And so I was able to text the IT director, and he went in and found out what happened, stopped it, and sent an email out apologizing for the excessive communications from the Kodiak Island Borough, and that is now fixed. Our GIS analysis is working with assessing on updating property lease information and working on migrating our premise map imagery to the cloud, which is going to greatly reduce our requirements for hosting online. At Bayside, they are getting ready for a fun event this weekend. They're doing a Dia de los Muertos celebration on Saturday for members and their families. They also had an open house this last weekend from 11 to 3. They have doubled their attendance from last year. They are still holding their Firefighter 1 and 2 program. Members are finishing up chapters 8 and 9. And the other thing that's going on at Bayside is they're still working to secure the drill ground. They have placed fencing and signage up so they can show the public where they should and should not be for their safety. Those safety barriers don't affect access to the dumpsters or that dumpster area over there. They're just marking off the area to keep people safe as they drill out there. I did add one thing to the reminder for budget discussions for fiscal year 26, which came from a citizen calling me. They asked if we would consider adding more money to the junk vehicle removal line item, which I thought was a good thing for us to discuss because our junk vehicle removal funds usually run out in the first quarter. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, move on to the clerk's
Thank you,
comment.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. The local election contest period has ended on Monday, October 27th. So I'm happy to share that information with you. And I would like to welcome our newly elected Assembly member. We had an orientation with him last Friday with all the department directors, so I think that was a good meeting with him. For those who are leaving town, absentee voting is still ongoing until Monday, November 4th. We are open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for absentee voting. So far, we have had more than 500 voters come in to vote absentee. On the first day of absentee, we had people lined up from here to the entrance of the Assembly chambers. So it has been very busy the past 2 weeks. The clerk's office staff will be actively engaged on election day, providing assistance throughout the electoral process, so we'll be in and out of the office. I would like to let you know also that we will be presenting you a contracts distraction list on November 21st. I will also start working on the legislative and the clerk's budget in preparation for my absence in December. I'm going on vacation, so I would like to get all those budgets at least drafted so that staff that I'm leaving behind are not too stressed out about it. So I'm going to keep it short tonight. Just one more thing, we have received an appeal from the Alutic Heritage Foundation. I have sent you information about ex parte contact. Please, when we receive appeals like this, don't start conversations or don't expose yourself to ex parte contact. In my email, I have explained to you what that is like, or the definition of that. We're also working on liquor licenses. Before you next week would be the B&B renewal. We also are dealing with the Island Hotels transfer of location for a license. We're also processing 16 liquor licenses that are up for their biannual review. So we are working on those, and you'll see those at the next meeting. I'm encouraging those who are incumbents on the different boards and committees to reapply. We have sent them emails. We have sent them actual mail that went in through the post office. So we've been constantly reminding everyone whose terms are expiring at the end of the year to reapply so we can fill our boards and committees. The borough offices will be closed November 11 in observance of the Veterans Day holiday, and also on November 28th through the 29th for the Thanksgiving holiday. If you would like to attend the AML conference, and I encourage you to, please let us know. We have set aside budget for that. For those who wish to attend NEO training, the newly elected officials training virtually, that's also available. I think it's at the end of November. And also, I will be emailing you in the next few weeks. We will be scheduling picture taking. So we need to update our website. We are missing a few pictures. We're maintaining a certain look or feel of our website. So we would like to keep the professional pictures posted on our website. So we'll let you know. Okay, that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Seeing none, move on to assembly member comments. Bo, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Just want to welcome Mr. Johnson on board. He's already hitting the ground running and feverishly putting together some information for us to consider at future meetings. So welcome aboard. Glad to have you. And just thanks for the good discussion. I think we had very good proactive discussions this evening. It was interesting to rope some service area folks into that discussion, and it seemingly resulted in a nice compromise moving forward. And I encourage folks when the assembly specifically, when we identify areas for improvement, to remember that we have a very small and very hardworking staff that maybe don't necessarily have the same backgrounds that we have individually that we bring to this body. So let's think about areas for improvements that we identify along the way as wins, and that we can improve processes going forward. But I do appreciate all the discussion today, and I'm very grateful for the expertise we have in this room.
Jared, I'd like to call on you next.
Oh, thanks. Nope, I don't have anything to add except also welcome Dave. It's going to be nice to have a little Gen X section of the dais up there.
Thank you, Jared. Next, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just thank staff for the amount of work that went into the presentations tonight is not lost on me. I know that each of those reports represents a lot of time spent making the preparations, double checking the work, and so thank you for that. This is in no way a criticism of the staff so much as an observation from my real job, and it's that I wish there was a way we could do better getting small businesses help in competing for some of these things. We've got like kind of a well-established core of contractors here in town, and I can't help but think there's a number of small businesses out there that would like to participate in some of these bids, or proposals, to get my terminology correct, but just lack the bench strength to do so. And we only get one or two bids for these projects. It hurts the taxpayers. So some way for people to pool their resources and compete for some of these government contracts, I think would help us as a body and help the community lower some prices. Heard a lot of talk about tourism tonight, just so I can plant my flag on that issue. I grew up watching my beloved town be destroyed by industrialized tourism, so you will not find an advocate for massive increases of tourism in Kodiak from me. Kodiak has long benefited from a very high value added tourism base with the guiding work and other things that happen, and that's wonderful. I don't believe the capacity exists to increase that by 40%. So you're talking the lower end tourism, which is what creates these housing shortages and the other issues we're seeing now. So other than helping the government tax base, I'm not convinced that large scale tourism does a lot for a community. Short-term rentals, I wish I shared the optimism of some of the other members here that this problem will resolve itself. Having watched other communities all over the country throw up their arms and finally tackle it legislatively, I don't think that's the case. I think we're going to have to lead from the front on this issue. Too many of our teachers in this district couch surf at the beginning and ending of the school year because the house they would like to occupy is back on the short-term rental market. So I see that as a severe detriment to our community. I will leave it with that. Again, thank you all for the warm welcome, and I look forward to learning from each of you.
Steve.
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and effort and staff. I'm also very pleased that we were able to deal with the district, us and everybody, and get that contract dealt with. And in the future, hopefully we can make sure things are written in such a way that when it comes time to award, we don't have a lot of concerns about details.
Thank you. Scott?
I want to encourage everybody to vote on next Tuesday. I think it'll be important for all of you, as well as all of us. I think winter is right around the corner. Our house has been changed fundamentally by my wife taking a job on the school board, and I want to congratulate her on doing that. Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Dave Johnson. So I'll echo Jared's comments, and maybe we can get rid of some of these old fogies on here.
23 months.
23 months. You'll hear that a lot, well, as it declines, 22 and 21. Special shout out to Patricia. Patricia in Facilities and Engineering has, in my opinion, in the little more than year I've been here, has grown instrumentally in her duties and her abilities, and I just want to give a very special shout out to Patricia. She is a wonderful asset to the borough. I'd also like to thank Rob and Ted for their presentation tonight. I found it very enlightening, and I am very eager to hear more about that. I do want to, I guess, pontificate for a second. Our actions speak louder than words as a government entity. We, in my opinion, should strive to set an example. I'll recall a recent event where regulatory-backed advice was given to staff and quickly dismissed by a lack of response, completely dismissed. The facts were known, and the choice was still made to proceed without regard to regulations. We aren't above the law here, and that, in my opinion, actually set the tone for me tonight. And so I don't know a better way to say this than if we could all just realize that there's a greater power working, whether we're a municipality responding or reporting to a state or a state reporting to the United States or so on. There is regulations in play. Regulations that I'm specifically referencing are in my wheelhouse, safety regulations. And when we're creating a scenario where we're blatantly disregarding occupational health and safety in the front of the Borough building and not listening to quick resolves or solutions and dismissing them and still continuing to break the law, I have a real hard time listening to putting faith in somebody else's health and safety when, as a leader, you don't follow it yourself. So I just hope that we can do better as a government entity representing, I guess, social just, and realizing that the actions that we take as a leader may also jeopardize the outcomes of our followers. So with that being said, Mr. Johnson, again, welcome to this dysfunctional family.
Next item is mayor's comments. Dave, I'd like to officially welcome you aboard. And I'd also like to say that encourage everyone to get out and vote, either absentee in person here up through Monday or physically on Tuesday. But please vote. With that, meeting's adjourned at 9:59.